Hello, and welcome to the 2023 Insurance Capital Summit. Woohoo, there we go. I like the energy. Thank you so much. Because I had in my notes, I hope that someone claps, so I really appreciate whoever that was. But we are thrilled to have you here today in Hartford, Connecticut, the insurance capital of the world, which also could do another clap for that. So welcome, welcome. I'm Kate Bauman with the Metro Hartford Alliance and with CTIFS, and today I'll be walking us through what is a packed day of incredible speakers, industry experts, and we're going to be touching on the opportunities and the risk managements of generative AI. So who's excited? Besides my one great clapper, who else is excited about this day? Perfect. Well, thank you so much. And first things first, we would love to give a big thank you to all of our sponsors. We are so appreciative of the support, in addition to all of the great energy leading up to today. Really, our team of sponsors and our team of the CTIFS board members really make today happen and make it a lot of fun leading up to it today. So thank you very much. And additionally, thank you. There we go. Oh, this is great. Okay, fun audience. This will be a good day. Perfect. Next, we would like to thank our industry supporter, the Department of Economic and Community Development. So we could give them a big round of applause, too, for all the work they do to support our industry here in Hartford and Connecticut. And now it is my pleasure to introduce and to bring to the stage Vice President and Executive Director of the CTIFS, Susan Winkler.
That is great. Thank you for, I think it's my mom. No, I'm just kidding. Here we are again. On behalf of the Connecticut IFS Board of Directors, thank you for joining us. This is our 10th annual, if you can believe it, 10th annual summit. But even more important, we're celebrating a milestone today. It's our 20th anniversary of meeting as a board of directors. So that says something. I'll talk a little about that during the reception. But once again, what does the summit do? It brings together the strength of that CTIFS board of directors and all those global brands that they represent. And the unity of their thoughts, it's right here in Hartford, in the insurance capital. They're willing to share that with you today and for the last 10 years, and that's pretty impressive. Today, though, we have a big topic, and two things. One, we've changed, who's to say insurance is not nimble? We've changed ourselves a little bit. We're here at the Bushnell today. That's important to say. We have a very intimate audience, a very select group of executives that are here. It's not at where we held it before in the past, where some of the other events have a lot of fanfare and a lot of other people. The people here are decision makers. Those that are leading the change and the disruption and answering the call to whether it's a global pressure, a regulatory pressure, or a consumer pressure. So today we're talking about AI and how the industry is working towards that. And as businesses, all you hear every day, somebody's embracing OpenAI or ChatGPT. The insurance industry is launching its own game plan on that new risk. And that's what you're going to hear the experts talking about today. So how can insurance companies prepare their workforce for the integration of Gen AI? How can the use of AI or Gen AI add efficiencies? And insurance companies have an enormous amount of data, and process efficiency is key and paramount. And on new products, how can Gen AI open up new markets and potentially some maybe underserved markets? We're going to hear about that today from our keynote. And most importantly, can AI be used to mitigate the cost of risk? And I ask you to think about that for a moment to the degree that we have heard with the probably unfortunate news of unfortunate losses of life and property and casualty with all the cat losses, fires and floods, and climate issues that we've heard about in the last 6 months to a year. So the game is on. AI is here to help. And today we're going to hear from some of those leaders deciding just how to make that happen. Before I go on, I would like to take a moment to recognize the UK-Connecticut InsurTech corridor. And I'm just going to say, from those that know what this is, in 2022, we signed an agreement between the two countries. This was an opportunity for US and UK InsurTechs to increase their knowledge of both those markets, the US and Europe, to connect with business development opportunities, and make transatlantic connections to accelerate business growth. And our partners are here today from the Department of Business and Trade. But there are two companies here from the InsurTech corridor, Matrix IQ and Flair, both making their trip here from the UK, and I'd like to give them a warm welcome from Hartford. And with that, Kate is going to come up to introduce the next title sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I was hoping, I don't know about these walkout songs. I don't know if maybe we should have people put names in a hat what you guys want to hear next on the walkout songs, but we'll jazz it up a bit this morning, or this afternoon. So next, we would like to recognize our title sponsor, Cognizant. Cognizant is the title sponsor of this year's Insurance Capital Summit and also a huge champion of the Metro Hartford Alliance and really our mission to help elevate the Hartford region. So if we could give a nice round of applause for Cognizant and all the work that them and their team do for us here. Thank you. And we would now like to welcome to the stage the head of Cognizant America's Banking, Financial Services, and Insurance. Also, she is a Metro Hartford Alliance board member, Meera Krishnamurthy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all have had a great morning, easy commute to the insurance capital. I'm Meera Krishnamurthy. I am proud to say I'm the resident of the area, in the area for the past 18 years, and been associated with insurance, Metro Hartford Board, and other local matters for a while. Today is all about technology, and I have to say there are people who often say insurance is behind when it comes to technology. Insurers adopt technology later, and I challenge them often to say when you are in a risk-based industry like ours, sometimes it's okay to be a quick follower than a rapid change maker. But having said that, today's technology is very promising. Come on, gone are the days where everything was written on a piece of paper and people sat across the table to write insurance policies. Still, some of those happen even today, but there are definitely the digital wave that's come in, virtual agents in place. Several things have happened. And through this process, as human beings, we have all gotten better. Business processes have changed, and even regulations have changed to keep up with this. So today, I'm super thrilled with the technology we have, be it OpenAI, GenAI, AI in general. I'm a big believer that how the phones, the smartphone, they changed the way we live today from 10 years ago. I believe this is going to be a huge change maker for us. So having said that, I want to leave you with the very able speakers. If I have to ask you to do one thing, forget cat losses, forget the project that you have to deliver, forget if your CFO wants you to answer an ROI on a business case, forget all of that. Focus on the great list of speakers we have here. I can assure you that you'll take a thing or two back to your technologists that can be implemented, and when you do that, just say you learned about that at CTIFS. With that, thank you for being here and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much, Meera, and again, thank you to Cognizant. It is now my pleasure to next bring to the podium the President and CEO of Metro Hartford Alliance, David Griggs.
Good afternoon, everyone. First thing I'd like to do is, again, thank some of our executive sponsors for today's event, specifically the Hartford and Travelers. Thank you very much for your continued support, not only of this Insurance Capital Summit, but of the Metro Hartford Alliance. I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to plug a couple other events that we'll be doing, specifically around our other initiatives, which many of you might be a part of. Our Health Council will be celebrating its 10th anniversary on October 18th this year, so if you're a member of the Health Council, don't forget to join us on the 18th. On November 1st, we're really excited to be sponsoring our first, through the Chamber of Commerce, HeartLift event. Those of you who don't know what HeartLift is, it is a program that the City of Hartford and the Hartford Chamber of Commerce developed to put ARPA money on the streets of Hartford. That money has created over 70 new restaurants and retail that will be opening in the City of Hartford over the next 6 to 12 months. On November 1st, we invite you all to come out and sample some of the restaurants at the convention center. Well, we'll be introducing many of these new restaurants to Hartford and the Hartford business community. And then finally, on November 14th, we will be doing our Next Gen Summit with HYPE, our Young Professionals group. So those of you who have a young professionals group within your organization, we encourage you to have those folks sign up. And finally, a little housekeeping. Today we'll be using Slido to capture your questions. So as our speakers are up, as the panelists are talking, you'll see a QR code on screen. Feel free to use your phone to capture the QR code. It'll take you online to get you to a page where you'll be able to real-time ask questions of our panelists. So if you don't get it now, don't worry. Again, during each panel session, we'll have the QR code up. Finally, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker. Our keynote today is Danu Banga. He is a director of solutions for generative AI at Google, leading efforts for landing applied AI innovations into Google Cloud's customers' products. Danu collaborates with customers, partners, Google DeepMind researchers, and Google Cloud engineers to design and deliver scalable, responsible generative AI solutions that meet concrete business needs. Before joining Google, Dan spent 15 years as a product and engineering leader, first delivering mobile payment technologies globally, then building Amazon Web Services engineering and technical field capabilities in domains such as big data, machine learning, and quantum computing. In his last role at Amazon, Dan led applied ML and quantum computing initiatives where he transitioned QC and ML science out of core research into cloud services. Examples like Amazon SageMaker, Amazon Bracket, Amazon Omics, and Amazon HealthLake, and managed the commercial growth of these products in industries. Dan holds Bachelor's of Science degrees in Physics and Computer Science from the University of Buell and the University of Washington, and Business and Entrepreneurship certificates from the Harvard Business School. In his spare time, Danu enjoys traveling, hardware electronics, structural biology, and learning new spoken languages. Ladies and gentlemen, Danu.
Thanks a lot for the time. Thanks a lot for being here. There's a lot to talk about with regards to Gen AI. It was a bit of a challenge for me to put this presentation together because this is such an exciting topic. It's such an interesting topic. And understanding where to get started and what is the direction to take is always a challenge. So I prepared some content specifically focused on telling a bit of a backstory with regards to some experiences that we've had at Google adopting Gen AI ourselves, and also telling a bit of a getting started story especially for folks in specific organizations and decision-making positions where essentially you have to ideate and you have to execute within the context of Gen AI. So I hope this content ends up being useful for you. So to get started, I have to get rid of this. I named this presentation 4 Eyes for Gen AI, for eyes, and you may understand it by the end of the presentations, but we will talk about innovation, incubation, integration, and inspiration in regards to Gen AI, and the 4 Eyes are for the insurance industry. To get started, AI is everywhere and plays a role everywhere in our lives, from updating pictures to essentially composing images or content or music. I think everyone here has heard about AI and or Gen AI in recent history. Who here knows what Gen AI is up to a certain extent and is familiar with some applications of Gen AI? Okay, pretty much everyone, so I don't have to go into definitions. The way I like to talk about Gen AI is in terms of a system. And the reason I mention a system is very specific because we will get to cover a lot of ground. I have about 612 slides for you. And it's super important to look at every single word in this presentation because we tend to think about, AI has been around for a while. It's been around for many years, more than 6 years. It's been applied in many forms and ways and shapes of the industry. And Gen AI really, really changes the game in the entire ecosystem. And so I want to take a moment to focus on this definition because generating is a new ability that some of these AI systems are able to do. And then when you think about the context of generating content, whether you're talking about images or text or structured and or unstructured data, new emerging opportunities start to arrive. So really, a system is the way to think about Gen AI because when you're integrating Gen AI within an application, within a workflow, within a use case, within the value chain and whatnot, you have to think about it within the context of multiple subcomponents working together. So let's keep this in mind, we'll get back to it. And before we continue, I want to give a demo.
Travel Guard. How can I help you?
Yes, can you tell me if travel insurance is a waste of money?
Travel insurance can help cover unexpected costs incurred before or during your trip, so that expenses can be less likely to come out of your own pocket. For example, if you have to cancel your trip due to an illness or injury, travel insurance can help cover the cost of your non-refundable airline tickets.
Can I put non-family members on my plan?
Yes, you can put non-family members on your plan if they live in the same state as you. Otherwise, you will need to purchase a separate plan for them.
What do I need to have to purchase an insurance plan online?
To purchase an insurance plan online, you will need to have the following information handy: personal information for all travelers who will be on the policy, trip details, and total trip cost.
I think I'm ready to buy. What's the best way to purchase my travel plan?
You can purchase a policy either online or through a representative at our call center. To purchase online, click here and you will be guided through our product comparison tool.
Well, thank you very much. That's all the questions I have. Goodbye.
Now, my favorite part is the smile of the avatar. This is super interesting because a lot of things go behind this interaction, and this is nevertheless a very simple and smooth interaction between a person and an assistant that has insights about the travel policy, that possibly could have insights about the customer, and that would have insights about the industry, and so on and so forth. So you can think about multiple, again, system components working together, but the real art here is in the ability to make that entire experience smooth for the user. So this is one of the opportunities that presents itself within the context of applying generative AI for support use cases, for example. Now let's move on. Okay, so let's get back to the definitions of AI and or machine learning or deep learning. And one of the reasons why I'm walking through this entire content is really to remind us that this is an evolution and there are a lot of things at play here. AI is this umbrella term for all things, in my view, related to orchestration, automation, and really getting systems to act as close as possible to human cognition, to human capabilities. So you may have seen this before, where AI can do planning, perception, scheduling, action, and so on and so forth. And within the context of AI, we do have mathematical and statistical techniques, many of them applied by the people that work in this industry, in the insurance industry. One of them is reinforcement learning, which is becoming very popular nowadays, and other older traditional techniques like support vector machine and k-nearest neighbors and so on and so forth. Within the context of machine learning, one of the subsystems, again, one of the subcomponents of applying machine learning is called deep learning. So deep learning in the last 6-7 years has been super popular when we applied deep learning to computer vision, to image recognition, and so on and so forth. So back in 2017, there's this technology or technique of really scaling deep learning called the transformers that gave us many opportunities that are related to Gen AI. So when you combine the transformers technologies back in 2017 and some of the machine learning techniques, one of them is called reinforcement learning, you start getting additional effect. One of the things also that played a role within this ecosystem is what we call the human in the loop, where it was able to get humans to basically give their own preference to the models or the AI models with regards to what they would want to see as an outcome of the behavior of the AI. And you combine that with a large amount of data sets that is being generated in the last few years, you get some additional capabilities. But before that, there's also been a number of techniques that were borrowed from the fields of mathematics and physics and additional techniques like deep order regressive capabilities, which are essentially the ability for a user or a system to generate the next best token or the next token based on the previous one. And the reason I'm walking you through this complexity is because it's important. So when you put all of these different capabilities together and then you start applying new UX or new user interfaces and new workflows and new tools, you get what we call large language models. Now, my key word here or my key theme here is the fact that many different parts play a role, but then once you put all of these different parts together, you start having what we call the emergent abilities of large language models. And some of these emergent abilities, I need to read the text here, one of them is learned from sample demonstrations. So you put all of these different capabilities together, borrowing from some domains in physics, applying humans in a loop, applying reinforcement learning, combining that with transformers, moving that into a large amount or large space of data, and putting new tooling on top of that, then you start having models that are able to reason, or you start having models that are able to follow instructions, models that are able to essentially behave based on certain demonstrations. And this is really the space of generative AI, and this is what is giving way to a lot of innovation. Now, the thing to remember here is that it's not many models or it's not many systems that are behaving across different use cases in different ways. It's one thing that was trained with all of these different components and has the ability to perform on all of these different emerging capabilities. Now let's talk about innovation. In the last many years, starting with in 2017 with the transformers, we've seen the evolution of AI or Gen AI specifically within the world of language growing. So we started with the transformers in 2017. In 2018, we introduced, at Google at least, a model called BERT, which made it possible for folks to essentially do things like text summarization and or explaining the content of a text. Fast forward 2022, 2023, we have the beginning of the systems like BART or ChatGPT, which are single, very big foundational language models that have these emerging capabilities that I just described in the previous slide. Now, one of the things that is super important to consider within the context of having these emerging capabilities and all large models is all the additional things that you need to do as a system owner, as a product owner, as an organization owner, in order for these products to work within your own enterprise application. And one of the reasons I'm going to insist on the word systems here is because, yes, we may have all of these different models that have great capabilities, but then these models have to be accountable to people. These models have to avoid bias. These models have to provide benefits to society, and so on and so forth. And these are really net new challenges, technological challenges in society and in the economy up to a certain extent, that have to be turned into technology component, that have to be part of the large systems that I mentioned. And so we are going to continue on that theme and see what we are doing in that space. But to double click on innovation, at Google in the past many years, we've been insisting on essentially studying these spaces, studying these large models, studying these emerging capabilities, and then trying to understand what are the new publications we can generate within that space, and we've published more than 5,000 papers, and or what are the new problems that we can solve in collaborations with corporations as well as academic institutions. So this really has been our focus in the last many years, and I'm going to get into some of those details. And focusing on that as well, we've been able to solve some of these problems. I will talk about some examples, I'll talk about some applications and some guidelines, ways to get started. But this is what we've done with this. We've been able to essentially solve for some of these problems and then put those solutions within our assistant technologies, and or Gmail and Google Drive and Google Photos in different ways, shapes, or forms. Now, let's talk about some trends within the Gen AI ecosystem. One of the things that I've observed is that once you start putting all of these different systems together, you start getting more general purpose machine learning models. Now, this is fundamentally different than applying AI like it was done in the past within, again, specific use cases, specific applications. Here we're talking about one thing, one model that has a general purpose knowledge about many different fields that can interact with users across many different topics, and that's really a key thing to remember. The other thing is that we've seen massive improvements in the efficiencies of machine learning models, just by being able to give it a lot of data, having the human-in-the-loop interactions, having the human preference injected into that, being able to ground those interactions within the preference of your company and or your organization. We're seeing step function improvements in the abilities of these models to help your businesses. The other thing, which is my favorite thing to talk about, is that there is a movement, in my opinion, from human-computer interaction to what I call human-computer collaboration. In that previous slide where we talked about the different pieces that get involved into getting some of these large models' emerging capabilities, my favorite thing to look at is the new UX that has to be taken into consideration. What are the new user experiences that you have to think about in order for these models to be part of your enterprise business processes, in order for these models to touch your users, your employees, your leaders, and or your stakeholders and partners. So there's this decent amount of collaboration that has to happen between a human and the AI in order to not just get business processes to operate effectively, but also to create new opportunities overall for either productivity or new products. And then so when you combine all of these different trends, at least the first three trends and patterns, what we're seeing is that there is a massive impact that is growing in engineering, science, health, sustainability, because you cannot just use AI and or Gen AI as a tool. You can also use AI and or Gen AI as an assistant, as an ideation partner, as a collaboration partner, in order to generate and execute and iterate on the ideas that you may have. So we're starting to see this flywheel of benefit, or this snowball effect, so to say. And so within an engineering context and or science context, you can ideate with a Gen AI model, you can have assisted research done with Gen AI, and then over that, some ideas may come up, and then you can start implementing that with Gen AI, and over that, some benefits may come up, and you may start implementing that within specific domains and or application workflows. So there's this flywheel effect and then this snowball effect that is happening, and it's a pleasure to at least be in a position where I can observe that, and I can work with some customers like you and or partners like you and see what you do with these technologies. But again, one of the key points really, one of the massive challenges or important thing to remember is this whole concept of responsibility, safety, and reliability. Most of these Gen AI applications, most of these Gen AI technologies are very probabilistic and statistical and stochastic by nature. What that means is that if you ask the same question to Bard or ChatGPT, you may get different answers based on 2 interactions with that model. So how do you think about making that a deterministic process, so to say? How do you ensure that you can leave a chatbot that is built on Gen AI to interact with your users and or customers, but still expect a specific outcome? How do you expect that the bot will talk about the specific products that you have in your product catalog in a deterministic manner, given the fundamental nature of some of these technologies? So again, there's a lot of new challenges that come in the picture when it comes to making these things safe and reliable. Now, the key, I hope I've succeeded in at least sharing the point that Gen AI is not just a technology, it's not just a model. In my view, it's really a transformational asset, assistant, tool, lab assistant, research assistant, product development and ideation assistant that can help you transform the way you build and interact with technology at the same time. So I'm very bullish on the concept of new user interfaces and new user experiences that can help feed this flywheel. Now, before I get into some examples and use cases and applications and ideas, I want to talk about some notable projects, some of the ways that we've been, or some of the tools essentially, or the models that we've worked on, and that's just a very small subset of some of these examples that I believe are relevant to this conversation. One is the PaLM model, which we announced a while ago, and there've been a couple of iterations already of that on some of the technologies that we have. The reason I want to talk about PaLM specifically is because it's associated with that concept of one thing, having enough knowledge about many things and many different tasks, that you really have this general purpose capability and ability coming out of this single generative AI thing. And so PaLM is one of the models that we train, 540 billion parameters, and this is actually on no slide. It's much bigger than that. And one of the emergent capabilities that we started observing after training and tuning and getting PaLM into some production applications is that we were able, with the same model, to do so many different things within the context of language application. So things from language understanding in more than 100 languages to summarization, arithmetic and logical computation, question answering, translation, common sense reasoning. Reasoning is a tough one, or jokes explanations and physics Q&A. Again, so the key opportunity here, you can transpose some of these concepts and ideas to different business processes, different business units, different corpora, or different contexts within your organization. So the real opportunity here is to have this one thing in a very effective and efficient manner to understand a lot of things about a lot of things within your organizations and business processes and value chain and stakeholders, and pull that together within the same information context. So this is beautiful. And I think you were told that I'm a physicist, so a lot of things that I do have equations in them. This is one example of a quantitative reasoning application of Gen AI. And again, it's important because you work with actuarials, you work with people that calculate risks all the time, and this is part of the language understanding abilities of Gen AI. And again, the beauty is on making this work alongside understanding the customer, understanding the business use case, and understanding different types of applications. So in this example, for this Minerva project that we worked on, you're able to ask a model, let a model know that the particles, if you remember your physics exercises, that the particle is moving at a certain speed, or the particle is in a certain position at a certain time, and then you want the model to find the speed. Now, the interesting thing, I think the thing to remember here, the thing I want to show here, is the ability for the model to not only answer the question, but also derive that by understanding what is speed and then understanding that to get, apologies about this, and understanding that to get the speed, you have to derive the position over time and to compute that derivation and eventually calculate the speed. So all of these different steps are happening within the same thing, within the same model. And this is a massive undertaking for a specific model to be able to do that within this context and across different contexts. Now, back to dialogue applications and building safe and grounded and high-quality dialogue application. And we'll bring this all back to the insurance industry, I promise. One of the patterns that you will observe is the ability to get a model, a large model, that has all of these different parts of various diverse understandings about the world, about mathematics, about language, about the world and whatnot, and then really bringing that to your own domain, bringing that to the insurance industry, bringing that to your company, bringing that to your business processes, and bringing that to your applications. And the way that happens today is by getting a pre-trained model, what we call a pre-trained model, which could be a model that we provide, it could be ChatGPT, it could be one of the models that you get off the open source community. And these models are typically trained on an order of trillion words, and they may have seen about 10 billion web pages. That's how they get that general purpose understanding, and then this is the content, this is the data that is passed through that technology space that I showed earlier, the reinforcement learning with human feedback, and then different other techniques that make it so that you can have a large model. Now, once you have that massive pre-trained model, that's a general purpose, knowledgeable model that can do mathematics, it can understand other things about the world. What you have to do is to tune that model to your domain, to your application, to your business, responsibly and safely. And a couple of things come to play there. One is to understand what are the safety and quality tasks to consider as part of this exercise. And the other thing to consider is how do you make this whole thing factual? How do you make this thing understand what are the products that you offer? How do you make this thing understand what are the customers that you care for? How do you make this thing understand that something is essentially true? And the way it's happening nowadays is by using an information retrieval technique and performing searches either into your own database of facts and assets and bringing that back into the model, or going out to the internet, and the whole process is called grounding. So it's super important to understand when and how and if you should ground the model, a pre-trained model, into your own assets, which is the design pattern that we're observing now. And usually, typically, depending on the complexity of the problem, you may need an order of 100 to 100,000 examples to show that to the model, for the model to be able to understand your space, your domain, your data, your company, your customers, and so on and so forth. So this is what your teams would do in order to get some of these big models to understand your specific domains, and for that model to essentially be factual within that ecosystem. And once you do that, one of the things that is becoming very prevalent within this space is the concept of evaluation, data, and metrics. The reason I talk about this is because traditionally, when we've talked about AI, and we've talked about other applications of machine learning, we've considered performance, we've considered precision, we've considered accuracy as the metrics that we consider, that we use in order to make sure that these models work well. But in the world of generative AI, we get hallucination that is becoming a new problem. We get models that is behaving out of bounds or out of policy that is becoming a new problem. So as business leaders and business users, you also want to direct the teams with regards to the business level metrics that you care about, or the business level requirements that you care about, for your teams to turn those into evaluation data and metrics. One of them that is my favorite is this model answering a question when it doesn't know the answer? And so what we've observed is that many times large models would just give you an answer, whether they know the specific answer or not. And so you can have that as a specific business metric, letting your team know that you wouldn't want a model to answer a question when it doesn't know the answer, and to redirect the user potentially to a human. And that could and should be encoded and put as part of this entire ecosystem for the model to be evaluated against that metric. And when you have all of that working together, this is how you can have a model serving either through chat or search interfaces, but having that model grounded within your entire business ecosystem and data. And so another thing that is important to know and remember is that a big model is not always the answer. In recent history, we've talked about large models going bigger and bigger, billions and billions of parameters, coming through trillions of parameters. And one pattern that you will observe nowadays is that the number of parameters are not being disclosed anymore. And one of the reasons for that is because, again, we realize that tuning a model, like I showed earlier here in this slide, may actually be a better thing to do. Getting a smaller model, which is more cost effective, may be a better thing to do than getting a very, very big model that would be expensive and not necessarily give you the outcome that you expect. So the major things really, the major thing, or the thing that matters the most in my view, is to make sure that the human preference is highlighted within the model construction or the model optimization of any use case and workflow that you're working on, and also making sure that the data is augmented to care for these safety objectives. The safety objectives that we're working on are things like avoiding harmful content. So we're creating what we call adversarial data. We're creating essentially harmful examples to test our models against. One of these, my favorite harmful example to give is the model saying, yes, I agree, when it's trying to be neutral. And so when a model does things like that, one of the things that you can say, for example, is ask a question that is offensive, and because the model wants to be neutral, it would just say, okay. But that also is a bad answer. So we want to be able to capture some of those. So to care for that, what we do is that we create a decent amount of what we call adversarial examples, and then we get humans to label some of these examples, and we use that to tune our models for safety. Again, I'm giving you these nuggets because I believe that these are important things to remember as you manage projects within the context of these Gen AI capabilities. Because everything else, you will get an introduction to new products and services, and you'll learn about all the features and things that are available. But these are backstories. Another thing that we're working on is something like avoiding misinformation and confrontational statements. So there's a lot of work to do within this space to make sure that models essentially do not confront users in a way that is aggressive. Now let's move on talking about incubation. So once you have some of these innovative capabilities, how do you put them into products? A couple of things that we've realized is it's way easier to build a general purpose model like ChatGPT or BART than it is to put some of these capabilities within your enterprise applications. So when you start with a general purpose model, usually what happens is that you only want to know how to create a recipe or how to generate a picture or how to create an outline for an essay that you're writing or how to create an outline for a presentation that you're giving on Wednesday, the 27th of September. So this is very easy to do compared to bringing some of these models to work within your application workflows, within your organization to care for your customers and users and stakeholders and partners. New questions start to arise there. One of them is, how do I control the data? How do I manage for fraud and security? How do I control the costs? Because some of these models get to go bigger and bigger. And how do I make sure that I can put these models in an accurate manner in business applications? So these are, again, because this is such a new field that straddles research and applications and production, our approach towards solving some of these problems has been extremely research-based. And so through working on some of these research problems, we came up with principles and patterns and policies, so to say, on how we approach solving these problems. So these are some of the priorities that we consider. There are 5 of them. One is making sure that IP is secured. Making sure that the models essentially provide provenance or lineage and give you the insights into where it's getting its information. And there are other artifacts here. One of them is managing the scale of the model, making sure that using the large models of scale doesn't break the bank, and also making sure that the models are easy to get started with. So these are the guiding principles behind the products that we're creating at Google, and it led us to essentially create this stack, this generative AI stack. Well, it builds on the cloud platform at Google, which is essentially called GCP. It has all the cloud services that I won't walk through now because we actually care about the top of the stack. And at the top, one layer above the cloud platform, we have what we call the model garden. The model garden is a location for all the models that we create, being open source or provided by Google or provided by third party. And on top of the model garden, we have the AI platform, which are the tools and techniques that help AI practitioners to build, train, and deploy large models, including some of the capabilities like the deep learning techniques like the transformer. Now, having the AI platform working well, ideally you want to get closer and closer to business users and business applications. And there are two major dimensions of putting these Gen AI capabilities within application workflows. One is through the search experience, i.e. you only have a question that you want the AI to answer, so you want to know what is, you're going through a risk evaluation or risk analysis for underwriting. So you want to be able to rapidly pull all the assets within your asset space that can help you do some pairwise comparisons in evaluation. And then you post a query to a search space that will bring back all the assets that you may consider for your analysis. The other one is through a conversational experience, which is the first demonstration that we made here by building a chatbot that is grounded within your information space and has the ability to interact with your end users. So these are the two major dimensions through which we've seen people using some of these capabilities. And this is really what we've focused what we call the AI developers or the developers experience around. So we've been building different tools around this experience, and these are the tools that help create the demo that I showed earlier. And on top of that, we have AI solutions or business applications that eventually are integrated within application workflows. To give a quick stop on security, because security is paramount and job number 0, our security principles are very simple. We encrypt data at rest, we encrypt data in transit. The platforms that we're working on are compliant for SOC and HIPAA eventually. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I just want to highlight that there is this clear separation between what belongs to Google and what belongs to the users or the companies that we work with. And we eventually make sure that there is the separation is clear. I'll leave this here because we have a lot more to talk about. And one of the important things also to work on, this is recent work that we've done, is making sure that the models remain responsible, safe, and factual, whatever that means. And I say whatever that means because this is an evolution. This is an evolving definition, so to say. Whatever is dangerous now or whatever is considered offensive now may grow in the future, and we want to make sure that we continue to do the research work that is required in order to capture these offensive statements or these offensive capabilities in the near future and make the AI able to capture them. So we've worked recently on technologies that eventually do things like watermarking of images just to help highlight to the users that the image is AI generated. And this is also the reason why we're working on citing sources to make sure that the AIs provide the provenance of the information that they generate in order to at least help audit and trace the data or the benefits. Now, this led us to this concept that we call managing AI risk. And managing AI risk, I'll break that down into 3 major categories too. At the lower level, there's risk involved with the infrastructure. There are issues like side channel attack, having an AI that is built in a multi-tenancy or having a model. And I believe you all heard issues with folks providing their company's data to GPT-based models and then that eventually being used to train the model. So there are things to consider there during with IP controls or during the model training phases to ensure that the models are trained, but the namespacing and the separation and segregation of information is considered within that space. So once you have the models created, the next thing to consider is the domain application or the domain adaptation of your model within your own industry. And when you start getting into that space, there are other issues that come into play. One, like the IP management, you want to make sure that your entities or your data or the information that you have behind within your entire ecosystem doesn't leak into the model. You also want to make sure that this concept of tuning the model is managed effectively. The generative AI models work with what we call prompts, and prompts are essentially the questions that you give the model for the model to give you a response. There's this entire new art that is being created now called prompt engineering. I don't believe it is engineering, but there's this aspect of gathering prompt and then passing them to the model in such a way that you can expect the model to give you an answer. And so you also have to manage the risk around that, because there is information in these prompts that go back and forth between the models and the users that use the model. And eventually, when you go higher up in the stack and the models are trained and they are ready to use within your organization, there are other issues that we've observed at Google, at least in our internal applications, where cost is becoming a problem because these models are getting bigger and bigger. And so the concept of FinOps here is essentially the ability to budget and build and predict the behavior of a model over time so that it becomes possible to manage costs effectively. Now, the last thing I'll talk about with regards to what we do in this space is the provisions that we make around responsible AI. So we created a list of classifiers, so to say, on the input and output that interact with generative AI models. And these are classifiers in different categories like these ones that are here that eventually users and customers can grab and help classify and allow their models to operate in production based on some of these dimensions. Now that's what we do. What do you do? My recommendation about getting started comes in 3 major dimensions, and you may know better ones. The first dimension that I recommend you think about is revisiting the productivity opportunities for every role within your organization. GenAI has this massive opportunity for driving productivity from content creation, from collaboration, from applications to different parts of the enterprise, from the researchers to the applied scientists to the product developers, the marketing folks. So I would suggest you revisit the opportunity for productivity at every single step of the different roles and responsibilities that exist within the organization. The second thing is on the value chain, there are opportunities for GenAI at every single step of the value chain. So I see that in 2 dimensions. One dimension is the people that exist in the organization, how can GenAI help them? The other dimension is the different products or value that the organization creates, how can GenAI help that? And the third thing regarding getting started is finding a low-hanging fruit, essentially. Finding a simple and easy low-risk use case, so to say, to start working with. And in general, search and information retrieval use case is a good one. Chatbot for question and answering use case is a good one, too. So those are different ways to get started, and I'm just going to quickly go through some tooling that exists. You may have seen this already with regards to creating content within a person's workflow from a productivity standpoint, creating content within a person's workflow from a spreadsheet organization standpoint, and this could apply to any use case within the organization, and or creating content, again, within a technical workflow like generating code, and creating content for things like marketing copy generation and or other multimedia type of content that may be pushed to your end user. So many opportunities for accelerating productivity for every single member of the organization. Now let's talk about integration, and this is the part you've all been waiting for. There are many opportunities to apply all of these different things within the context of insurances, from customer service to business process optimization to product development. And some of the things that we're observing is that our customers really, again, at different parts of the value chain are applying GenAI. On the customer experience, I showed an example of my friend and colleague James talking to an avatar that was built on top of this entire interaction that is grounded within the space of the information content of a company to explain benefits and policies regarding travel insurance. The other thing that we're seeing is that AI is being used, or Gen AI is being used nowadays to essentially improve the transparency and also accelerate the process of risk evaluation and calculation for underwriting. A couple of other dimensions that we're seeing is the acceleration of claims processing and compliance content generation and submission as well. So I will share the slides, but you may want to take a picture of this. There are many different dimensions through which we are seeing AI and Gen AI being applied in the insurance industry. Again, one of my favorite ones is the interaction with a chatbot, because I think it's very simple, it's very easy to put together, it's very easy to get started with. I'll move faster on these different examples because I've talked about them already. Now, the last thing I'd like to talk about is the inspiration. And this is something that Susan and I talked about when I got invited to come speak at this conference. What I thought I would do is to ask Bart to essentially tell us what we can do with Gen AI. And I have, the time that we have, I have a script here where essentially I would ask Bob to give me 5 steps to perform actuarial calculations. So let's assume here that we're working within the context of an actuarial scientist or someone looking for new ideas and new opportunities for banking and insuring the unbanked populations. And I'm asking the model to include calculations and methods to increase property ownership for underserved communities. And just within a few seconds, hopefully, you get the model to essentially give me different steps with details. I will share the scripts for the demo without going through all the details, but it's essentially telling me to gather the data, identify the risk with some levels of explanation, developing actuarial models, set the premiums and prices, monitor and refine the models, and developing new risk and pricing models and blah, blah, blah. Now, this is interesting because just in this ideation phase, I can ask the model to rephrase it or iterate on that and give me different options. Assuming I'm happy with that, I'm going to say, hey, okay, so update this model with methods to improve credit report calculations. And again, it's going to do the thinking, but the thing to remember here is that it's working off the context that and the interaction that has happened before, and it's essentially letting me know that I could consider alternative data sources, developing more accurate risk models, and work with credit bureaus to improve data quality, and so on and so forth. So even within the context of working in an organization and having multiple stakeholders around the table, and that was my whole point around productivity, it's becoming a tool that can essentially help every role within the organization. Another thing that I would say is, hey, okay, build a risk model based on these steps and these recommendations that you just gave me, and let me know what it looks like. So again, within this interaction, and then within a matter of seconds, hopefully, I have different steps with a table that gives me information about risk factor, the weight, borrower score, and product. I may or may not agree with approach or the information here, but this is an excellent starting point, in my opinion, that I can start iterating upon, right? So just based on this information, I can also, assuming a project manager is in a room, then the project manager can say, hey, okay, write a project plan to implement these strategies, where you can have additional considerations like business approvals, planning, owners, what is the project timeline, phase, who are the different stakeholders, the budget, the phase. But then all of this is done within the context of the initial conversation that happened. And then if the software engineer is in the room, then that person will say, well, I'm interested in the software design or in the design document for this entire interaction. How about you write a design document for the implementation of that project plan that the project manager just got the AI to give them and give it to me. Well, this is where it becomes interesting. So the same context from the ideation session is being carried all the way to some initial phase of planning and eventually implementation, because the software engineer now has code, real Python code, that works, that shows them how to essentially gather a risk model, compute that, and calculate it according to all the different considerations that were given by the model initially. So with the time that I have, I'll stop there, but the last thing I would have asked the model would be to essentially write the entire implementation and then giving me a folder structure that I can download and deliver as part of my deliverables for the year. So, I mean, this whole exercise took about 2 minutes. I'm not saying that it's of excellent quality, but this is an example of how different stakeholders working around an ideation table within an organization can come up with an idea, and having one multi-purpose, multi-types of knowledge AI to work with them and then identify who are the users, what are the ideas, what is the planning like, and what is the execution like, and the execution would be for the designer, the developer, the engineer, and so on and so forth. So with that, I'll pause and stop here. Thanks a lot for your time and attention.
Thank you very much to Dan and to the team at Google. If everyone could give another round of applause, that was incredible. Dan will be back to join us later this afternoon to join us for our fireside chat. And in addition, we have a lot of good lineup that's still happening here today. So to give a little bit of a snapshot, we have two further panel discussions, which will be kicking off our first one very shortly. Additionally, too, as I mentioned, the fireside chat, and then also, too, Governor Ned Lamont will be joining us at 5 o'clock and addressing the audience. And then the fun doesn't stop there. We will be hosting our cocktail reception in celebration of the 20th anniversary of the CTIFS, where Mayor Luke Bronin, the mayor of the city of Hartford, will be joining us. So we hope everyone can stick around for the remainder of the day. So with that, our next panel, our first panel of the day discussion, is coming up now, and we would love to say thank you to our panel sponsor, Infosys. If we give a warm applause for them. Truly appreciate their support, and we encourage everyone, and let's see, it's going to be coming up on screen as you'll see that QR code, and if you want to scan it, and then that's where you can enter in all of your questions. We will be taking Q&A during this panel and also the next panel discussion. So again, the next slide, that'll be popping up. We encourage you to submit your questions throughout the presentation. And so now, please join me in welcoming our panelists to the stage, in addition to our moderator, Paul Tyler. Paul is the Chief Marketing Officer at Nassau Financial Group and a member of the Metro Hartford Alliance Board.
Well, good afternoon. We were just checking our chat bots to prepare for the remarks here. A wonderful presentation. I agree with, I think, Mira, who talked earlier, that we're on the cusp of something very incredible in a lot of different parts of our business, particularly here in the insurance industry. And excited for the panel. And we have some very distinguished panelists who are going to join us to talk to us about all things Gen AI. I guess the first question I'll ask, and I'll sort of asking Bart, I'll ask Dan, is we saw some really good examples on the fly from Bart in terms of idea generation in the insurance industry. And you're actually, and you and your team are actually have gone through this exercise. How do you look at the opportunities that are in front of the insurance industry, you know, right here in the greater Hartford area?
Sure, yeah, and I should caveat for everybody, I am not an expert level technologist, as our keynote speaker was. I am an innovation practitioner. So what I do through experimentation with my team is take things from possible to plausible to practical with tightly controlled experiments. And also to reiterate what the keynote speaker said, The operative term with Gen AI is generative, right? The creation of content. And the creation of content, whether it's text or whether it's audio or whether it's imagery, the creation of content in response to a prompt based off of how it's been trained and the guardrails it's been trained on, and a corpus of data that it's been aimed at, which is by definition more limited than a human's corpus of data would be. So what Gen AI is not to us in insurance, Gen AI is not decision making. Gen AI does not think or apply logic in the same way that a human being does. What it is useful for is for helping humans become more efficient. Instead of having to create content from scratch, we get a bit of a head start. So I'll rattle off a couple of ideas in the back of my head with that as the preface. So one thing Gen AI is good for is if you can point it at a data set, you can use it to get insights and analysis out of that data set. And so my core day job, day-to-day at the Hartford, is leading our IoT innovation team. And what we do is we take data and sensors from data from sensors to try to eliminate bad things from happening, to try to prevent losses, prevent people from getting in car accidents, prevent workers from getting injured on the job, prevent property damage, et cetera. And as a part of that, we capture a lot of data from those sensors, and we put it in the cloud, and it's all anonymized, and there's no PII, et cetera. And we analyze it. When we analyze it to look for trends, and we try to predict where and when bad things will happen. Well, I'm envisioning a world someday where I can walk into the office in the morning and say, hey, Gen AI, how many instances did we have in the last 24 hours where a vehicle we insure went more than 100 miles an hour? Let's assume that Gen AI said there were 3. I would respond with, perhaps, can I have the names of each of those customers, the underwriters associated with those customers, the risk engineers associated, and please draft me emails to each of those underwriters and ask them to reach out to those agents and those customers, understand what happened, and respond with how they're going to mitigate that from happening in the future. So that's one potential application in terms of pointing it at the data. I think it's very useful for the creation and pre-fill of documentation, whether that be an underwriting file, whether that be an HR file, a risk engineering report, et cetera. It's also good at creating suggested prompts. And a lot of people think of it in the form of suggested prompts for customer service experiences, but it also could be for underwriters. Documentation can live all over the place for underwriters. And one use of Gen AI would be to say, give me the answer to this question where I don't understand the guardrails. I've never underwritten this thing before. What should I be looking for? And it can return quickly a synthesized answer. The other thing, and I'll end soon.
Please.
I could go long, but
yes.
I try not to. The other thing that's interesting about Gen AI is its ability to respond in terms of modulating its style and tone in how it generates the content. And so from a marketing perspective, or from my perspective, if I'm leading a project, I can ask the Gen AI to say, hey, take my PowerPoint presentation of my project status update, convert it into a memo that would be stylized and appropriate for the CEO, and also convert it into an email for the extended stakeholder groups. I would never hit send on any of those emails before reviewing it in depth myself, but if it can save me a half an hour, et cetera, that's a step forward. The other thing related to that I think it could be useful for is providing a simulation environment. A simulation environment, for example, that could be used where you can interact with the AI instead of a human being for training purposes. So if I could say to the Gen AI, I want you to behave like an employee who's really stressed out and overworked and has high anxiety, and I'm going to practice giving you constructive feedback before I actually have to do that with the employee, right? And so those are just a couple of examples off the top of my head, and I definitely look forward to the day Gen AI can help write my talking points for speaking engagements.
That's great. Now, those examples you mentioned are all internal facing. Now, I love the demo of the avatar selling the travel insurance. In fact, and we have a pilot with Google as well on the same platform. You can actually talk, I won't give anybody the number, but you can dial an 800 number and talk to our website. It's also telling us we need to rewrite our website as you start to have these things interact with the content you have on them. How long do you think it'll be before some of those pilots are actually talking? Your company's comfortable letting the AI speak directly to the customer, the policyholder?
Yeah, I should be clear. I think I give credit to the keynote presenter, I think Dan did a really nice job. In addition to having a great name, he did a really nice job at being forthright and transparent about the challenges that Google is perceiving and that they're solving. And those challenges have not all been solved yet. And in addition to that, we don't have anything yet in production, to be totally transparent with the group. A lot of the work, though, there's a lot of excitement, right? So, and the excitement goes all the way up to the C-suite and the CEO, which is in the insurance industry, I think a bit different relative to technology innovations in the past, at the level of attention, the level of conversation, and the excitement. But at the same time, we're spending our time now very much, in addition to generating this long backlog of ideas, we're spending our time trying to figure out the right structure. How do we do it smart? How do we do it safe? How do we make sure we've got people trained, people certified, the right governance structures, the right sandboxes, et cetera? And to my core day job, we run experiments in a very controlled way before we ever release anything out into the wild, because we have a saying on my team which goes, until you run an experiment in the wild in a controlled way with customers, you know nothing. You really know nothing. All you have is hypotheses until you actually try it. But before we even get there, there's a lot of ground we still need to cover in terms of making sure it's safe and ready to go.
Yes, those are some really good examples. Connect, you're in a very unique position to have done this exercise across multiple types of insurance companies and different sectors of the market. Tell us, how do you look at the world of opportunities? What is your map? What is your funnel for sifting opportunities?
No, absolutely. Paul, I think, again, I got to draw upon Dan's presentation because he's done a good job of providing behind the scene what's going on in OpenAI and Gen AI. But then if you look at our worldview as a provider to multiple verticals, and in particular, I manage the insurance vertical. I'll come back in a moment on the insurance. But I think it's a great opportunity to really leapfrog, especially post-pandemic. If you think about most of the things which were physical has moved to digital or phygital in a way. So to that extent, most of the industry has adopted digital as the way of doing business across the value chain. And then comes the Gen AI to say, hey, you know what, there's something more you could do. So that way is a great opportunity. I think, again, Dan presented the behind the scene that's been going on. And ML has been there, as most of you have seen the presentation, the ML and the deep language is going on, but then now you have the Gen AI capability. If I then switch it to the insurance business, I say that insurance vertical is the guardians of the global economic risk in some sense, taking a leaf out of the Marvel's legacy. Really, everything an economic risk is being underwritten in the world. And look at it from that lens, it's all about risk management and risk expertise. How is Gen AI going to prevent or protect some of the, let's say, the assets and the liabilities, both at the individual capability as well as enterprise and government? And in this, I feel that the speed, I think if you watch Dan's presentation very carefully, there were some very simple words he used, which is speed. Speed is of essence, and I feel that's one thing you will see the insurance industry will embrace much more openly, especially post-pandemic. The second thing you would notice, he talked about accuracy many times, because you need models to be accurate about what you provide as data. And this is where enterprises embracing Gen AI, how do they actually build their own data sets and so on and so forth, and have some proof point. The last one is the trust, which is somewhat like responsibility, safety. He talks about the features, which is important for enterprise as well as individuals to adopt these things. So in my view, I think we are on that cusp of getting out there. And I think you will see a lot of it is with speed. And most, I doubt whether anybody in this audience have not used a ChatGPT login, because that's the speed of data set. You ask a question, it gives you something to play with. So the speed has been proven by ChatGPT login. If you haven't tried it, I'm sure you would try it after listening to this, because this is an easy one. You just use your own Google login to just do a ChatGPT. Then comes the accuracy, like saying, okay, do I need to save 401k or do I need to plan my retirement? There's a little bit more accuracy. So we are very excited by this whole Gen AI paradigm, and more so for insurance industry, where you are basically underwriting the global economic risk. It's actually going to be fantastic for the industry.
So if we strip the business lines off the companies, forget about what type of insurance, and we looked at the functional areas supporting the deliverance of insurance, is the area with the richest opportunity the underwriting? Is it the claims area? Is it, where do you see the first stop?
Yeah, the first one would be the user experience. Again, Dan talked about the user experience and the conversational AI, which was like, providing the information. I think the lot of the focus would be on the user experience because you're not a new company. I mean, you could potentially have a digital native company coming in the insurance field, but insurance has been there for a long time. So most of the companies would look at the engagement and the experience, whether it is advisor, broker, or even the end consumer. How do you actually create more experience? And that's where we are also seeing. For example, you want to have a voiceover quote, right? You don't want to like read some 2 pages, 5 pages. You just say, okay, this is your risk and this is the kind of quote you're getting. So you would like more and more on the user experience first. And my own personal view is the second area would be the claims, because you want absolutely friction-free experience on the claim side, especially as individuals, whether it is auto, home, so on and so forth. You want an absolutely beautiful experience, friction-free. I'm not so much, worried about underwriting simply because insurance business thrives on underwriting. They all have lots of data, and I'm sure some of you would have seen Warren Buffett talks about in Berkshire annual meeting, how he talks about the rich data the insurance business has been having. So it's not going to massively change the underwriting, in my view, but everything to do with the end experience, consumer experience, whether it is buying or claim, is going to be the game changer.
Well, thank you. And Chris, talk to us about the research you're doing, the areas you see carriers exploring the most, and where you think the proverbial puck will be headed over the next couple of months.
Well, Paul, is everyone sitting down? Are we all sitting? I think I was invited here to talk about this research that we do at Verisk Analytics. It's all available on our website. My team puts it out every week, and you're sitting. I ask if you're sitting because there's a lot of opportunities. We're in the risk management industry, aren't we? We're in the insurance world, so risk equals opportunity for our business, and we also try to help the world make it more resilient, and to help businesses like you folks all mentioned earlier. My team monitors and researches over 68 topics. Number 69, not in any order, artificial intelligence, generative AI. Okay, so the opportunity equals risk, which in my mind, and we always joke a little bit on the side, is the sky is always falling at emerging issues at Verisk, because we're looking for opportunities and the risks, and there are things that we should keep in mind, especially with the generative AI concerns that were hinted at a little bit, but a couple of them come to mind would be possible inaccuracies, possible inaccurate bias in the training data. Things of that nature could really be of concern for different coverages like general liability coverages, professional liability, errors and omissions, for example, that's used potentially by various law firms to crunch a lot of information, a lot of case law, doing that research quickly. Like you said, reducing time, and time efficiency is really key here. But in the result, is there an accuracy there? Is there a potential for an errors and omissions claim there, for example? So those are some of the things that we do our research on, and we write them all up in our research papers available on our website. Please use us as a tool to understand this new tool that's coming out. Now again, there's opportunities with generative AI, but there's also many concerns as well. Offline, we actually chatted offline. I forget who mentioned during our prep talk about something called drift. Anybody hear of the word drift in generative AI? Well, hallucinations we've heard of, right? You've probably heard of the mainstream. Drift is where, and there's a study out, you can look this up from the University of, I believe, Stanford and Berkeley, And drift is basically, they looked at some of, you ask the same questions of generative AI, you get a different response. You get inaccurate response, you get errors, you get mistakes. This is a really interesting study, you should go check it out. GPT 3.5 compared to GPT-4, which is the all-powerful now, right now, because you can do so much more, including adding images. They compared it March 2023 and June 2023. Same questions, they're getting different answers. Some of them, GPT 3.5 was actually getting a little smarter for some things and not so smart for others. And the same is true for GPT-4. So that is what they call drift. So I think we mentioned it before. So what do you do about that? Like what, does anyone have any concerns about this? At the Emerging Issues team at Veritas, we do. So we're trying to write more and more on this, as well as hallucinations and things of that nature. So I think the accuracy and that ability to trust the results is really, really important. The flip side of that is, of course, is the efficiencies. So it will absolutely turbocharge all sorts of product development.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think, as you mentioned, like the testing usually in a lot of organizations, sort of the last thing you think about is probably the most understaffed areas of the company typically. Implementing models like this tips that structure on its head. Now suddenly testing is suddenly will be an incredibly important function going forward. I kind of look back over the last 10 years and think we've seen two big waves of technology, wash over us, and they're still rolling over us. Moving to the cloud, very controversial when it happened. Companies actually move data to the cloud, put it in somebody else's server, and trust them with the data. A lot of emotions involved. We did it. Second one, digitally enabling the customer experience. We have a lot of people here in the room who've put a lot of energy at creating better experiences. This third wave is again, different wave, requires a different approach. So suppose I've taken these slides, I've gone back to my CEO, I've made the case to the C-suite, or maybe the board, as to why and how we should do this. And I have the mandate, Paul, drive our AI strategy. Where's the bat phone? Who do I call?
Yeah, no, I think it is true. So I think, if you again dial back to insurance industry, since most of the folks here, insurance, financial service in some sense, I think that the purpose of that organization is very important, or the industry itself. And as you said, like if your board or CEO calls and say, hey, Paul, what do I do? So you got to set the agenda. I mean, you got a very good backdoor view from Dan as to what's going on in the world of technology. But then you are looking for, business use case, or you're looking for where do I use it? What's the ROI for it? And goes back to what Chris was talking about, like what's the risk? Because you are in risk management business, but then what are you, going to risk? So I think the first one would be, I would say, is to get a good look at your user experience, your, let's say, customer, broker, whichever area you're dealing in the value chain, because insurance industry is also a very tightly trusted, value chain. And to that extent, you may want to just look at saying, okay, can I just start looking at, maybe Dan can answer some of them as he's kind of working in the kitchen, so to say, okay, what do I, but generally speaking, we look at enterprise. Let's say you're an insurance company and you say, okay, where do we start? So you look at the value chain, you look at the players, you look at how do we enable, how GenAI can actually enable, be it speed or accuracy. So things like, call center became very big when the pandemic hit because everything moved to the digital. And I've heard stories from different CIOs in the insurance industry, how they had to do a lot of patchwork because they were not prepared. But now you look at the foundation already last 2 years. Now you say, okay, can we then take advantage of GenAI capability? That was, again, a very good video shown. Like, my personal view is, as an insurance player, as customers, we all keep trying to call our insurance firm for a variety of reasons, especially when there's trouble, right? And the trouble seems to be not ending. It's there every moment, every day. So to that extent, how fast can you get the right answer to your client, whether it's a broker or advisor or your end consumer? And I really hate to say this, like call centers should not have this, your call is important, you wait for like forever. So that's again a great application when you look at Gen AI capability. And to Dan's point, it's only not the guys who are speeding at 100, but have you have mechanism to check internally to say, okay, why are we spending 1 hour with this customer? Why have you not even called back? Can you not return the call in like 3 minutes? So you got to have internal mechanism to use Gen AI capability to ultimately, get your customers to be in a great place. So I would say start with the user profiles, start with the user experience, look for opportunity. Of course, you need good data. You need a foundational data to train the models to make sure that it is, performing what you need. The accuracy is also important. So you don't want to send off some kind of an answer to your customer query without really checking the accuracy. I really like that, I don't know how many of you caught that, HITL, human in the loop. That was a great one. So if not anything, you will remember that acronym going out of this conference, HITL. That was pretty cool. So if you look at insurance business again, you got to have a lot more knowledge-based humans who take decisions. So in some sense, Paul, my answer would be, look at the players internally in the value chain, look at an assessment, and then of course, everything else we'll take care anyway, in terms of good data and training the model and so on and so forth.
So great. I've done that. I've got this wonderful map. Where are the gaps in the bench? When we went through the cloud, when we've been going through the cloud migration, people who were AWS certified were at peak value for a number of years. We went to digital, looking at digital journey. Hard to find mobile developers, hard to find people who understood how to link that interface with the data. Where's the gap today in generative AI? I know I've seen prompt engineer ads for ridiculous sums of money, but organizationally speaking, where do you see the biggest gaps when organizations try to pilot this stuff today?
Yeah, talent is definitely one area you would notice, right? And I think you're not a technology company, you're an insurance company. So how do you get the right amount of talent for these kind of train the model, generate the model? And as Dan said, he's a physicist and in a mathematics, so you probably need more people with different caliber of people because you're also looking at experience. You're not only looking at just the science, but you also need the experience. So in some sense, the talent factory, if you look at most of the university, I think Connecticut, Hartford is a great place. You got lots of university. So you need to start having programs to build those talent. And I think, it's a great opportunity for industry to work together with academia to kind of influence the talent pool. And I think my own sense is that's going to keep changing. I know, 20 years back, if you had asked about digital or stuff like that, people would have said like, hey, what are you talking about? So likewise, you have another next 10, 15 years window for you to, generate the talent that is required as the businesses embrace these new technologies. So again, great example by Google to say, hey, we are already, probably they were researching for 20 years anyway, right? So when you are ready for consumerization or enterprises adopting technology, you definitely need the talent.
Oh, Dan, you actually did put the program together with your team. Tell us what it was like, what was required to get an organization to say, yes, this is an opportunity, let's execute it. And I think probably the most interesting question embedded in there would be was this different from, say, a major IT business operations type of project, say, 3 years ago?
Yeah, we at the Hartford have had, since I've been involved in innovation, so I spent the first dozen years of my 20-year career at the Hartford in core insurance functions, and then the last 8 years in various forms of innovation, starting back and I'm sure you're familiar with this trajectory, right? Going back to InsurTech in 2016, the venture capitalists disrupting the dinosaurs. Since that time when I've been involved, we've been increasingly getting more and more excited about the role of technology, advanced analytics, data science, AI in driving innovation and digital transformation. So every time you ride a wave, if the next wave's maybe a little bigger, you've got the muscles from the smaller waves you kind of trained on. So that's kind of my view and I think, I don't know for sure, but I would extrapolate that perhaps to the insurance industry as a whole, where I think we've kind of gone through this journey and we've gotten better and better and better, and it's opened up people's minds, and people now understand better how do we organize around this. So it's actually becoming less difficult in terms of getting the sponsorship and getting the excitement going, which is the most important part of innovation, by the way. If you don't have sponsorship, you don't have innovation. So check that box, now it's about execution. And that's really where the focus is.
Yeah, any differences, like were there certain areas of the company that were probably more involved than others? You know, for instance, IT security, risk, law. Where did you have to sort of push the areas of discomfort inside the company to move forward?
Yeah, I think the first area of push was generally thinking about opportunity as opposed to risk. We manage risk as a business, and so we also tend to be risk averse because we like predictable, stable earnings, et cetera, et cetera. So the notion of even running an experiment is a unique notion because we're also organizations that think about ROI. Well, when you run an experiment, there's no ROI on the experiment. It's opportunity, it's learning, it's the ability to then go to the next step. And so those were some of the hardest hurdles that we had to tackle, was just getting our mindset around innovation as a practice. From that point forward, once you have sponsorship, it really does help to break down the rest of the barriers. And everywhere I've gone, I've found willing partners, willing to engage, willing to think, willing to stretch their minds. Then you get to, beyond experimentation, you get to change management and implementation, and you've got a whole different set of issues there and challenges there, but that's a different animal.
Yeah, thanks. Well, Chris, you mentioned the risks. I like what
I'll mention
said.
many times about this risk.
Shifting risk to opportunity is rather interesting. I've seen a big dichotomy in carriers in approach to this. I mean, I've seen a number of them immediately lock down, put firewalls up, tell employees not to use this stuff. And by the way, this is not confined to insurance companies. At the same time, as I've looked through and watched the news, I've seen a shocking number of insurance companies and financial service companies actually publicly talking about pilots. How do we make sense of both? Or, you know, is this a little bit of a, you know, quantum innovation? You know, we have fear and innovation taking place at the same time in some of these companies.
I find this really, really interesting, these developments happening at the same time. And the emerging issues team, we're talking about this all the time because we're always talking about, well, how can the insurance industry leverage this new technology to increase efficiencies and claim solutions and anti-fraud and things of that nature, and better underwriting, understanding unstructured data. So exciting. At the same time, we think about, well, what's the flip side of that? Like, you know, what could go wrong, right, with this, with the use internally? And then we think about the use externally. So insurance companies are thinking about using this to improve their operations, but their insureds are also thinking of using. Many are using AI today, and now they're going on to generative AI. Think of the potential. Again, I have to bring it up. It's an opportunity for us as a management industry, but it's a risk. It's a new risk. Generative AI, for example, evolved the prompt window. For example, let's think about like cybersecurity. If your insureds are using some form of generative AI, and there's a prompt window depending on what version of generative AI. That prompt window is either this size or it could be this size. And that one version of the latest platforms went from, they count more or less like words that you put in the prompt window. They call them tokens, but it went from, I believe it jumped from, in the last year and a half or 2 years, from 2,000 tokens to 32,000 tokens. That's right, 32,000 tokens. That prompt window allows good actors to put information in there, train, refine the systems, get information. It also allows bad actors to potentially fool the system, make the system do different things once it's exposed out there. If you have your insureds out there using this technology, well, how many are using this technology? Do we know? Again, for me, that's really interesting for our industry, because we do our industry underwrites. So you underwrite based on information and understanding the risk. Well, our risk needs more understanding now because they're doing new things. And just because you are a small business nowadays, I'll bring this up. I don't know if anyone mentioned this, but it's really inexpensive now. This artificial intelligence technology, one of the biggest changes here is it's getting cheaper and cheaper, which means more and more industries can use it. And of course, I have to say, more and more bad actors can use it too. I'm obligated to say that, being on the emerging issues team. Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see both sides and how the insurance industry can understand how to use it operationally and how to start thinking about, and this is what our team does all the time, research what other industries are and how they're using it, like the marketing industry, the healthcare industry, and I mentioned before, the legal industry, all different facets, and they're all using it for great efficiencies and improvements. But there's also that other side, that risk side that we need to think about, and they need to think about it because it's their business, right? It's business risk, right? But we also should think about it in a way because it's also a potential opportunity. I want to leave my comment on a positive note.
I think Chris is exactly right. I mean, imagine the example I gave earlier, where I was talking about the email or the memo that I would have the Gen AI create for me, and then I would, proofread it before I ever sent it to the CEO. Well, if you've got the paralegal who's doing a legal briefing with Gen AI and doesn't pay enough attention, becomes overly reliant, it gets too busy, whatever, and the AI hallucinates or the AI makes a mistake, how do you think about that as the professional liability carrier for that law firm? How do you know it's happening? How do you know how much it's happening? How do you manage that risk? Those are risks that we don't necessarily have to deal with yet today, but we are already now starting to have to keep a deep eye on that. I'd extrapolate that even beyond our customers adopting AI, as if you're a cyber insurer, right? Because what Gen AI does is it gives cyber hackers an upgraded toolkit, right? Gen AI is very good at writing very convincing phishing emails, and most cyber risk is a product of social engineering. In other words, people get tricked into doing something they shouldn't do, clicking on a link, downloading a file. Imagine getting an email from your boss in their tone, in their style, in their handwriting saying, click on this link right now. The odds, the risk goes up. Not to mention on the fraud side, right? Gen AI can produce, I don't know if you guys have seen the Tom Cruise videos, right? Very convincing videos.
Yeah.
Imagine Gen AI producing a picture of an auto accident that didn't happen and having to deal with that as a claims organization. So we do have to not just think about how we are thinking about AI and adopting it, but how the rest of the world is using it and how that affects our view of risk.
Interesting. I remember when I was working for another insurance carrier and we had a whole ring of people in a town selling tickets to accidents, but now they don't have to sell tickets to accidents, right? They could generate their own deep fake video of the accident. Let's talk a little bit about risk. The NAIC came out with sort of a model bulletin for artificial intelligence system policies and procedures to put in there. And I read through a lot of this stuff makes sense. There's a provision that says, by the way, you must also be responsible for looking at AI that's used internally, but also by third-party vendors. Now, we saw a little bit of what Google's doing with their software. I've seen what's coming to Teams. I've seen what's coming to Word. So Dan, all those things you're talking about will show up on our desktop if we don't even have a project doing this. How should risk management change inside companies to reflect a whole new environment, a lot of which we can't control in our companies?
Yeah. No, so with that, I think let me just start by saying that I think you saw some bit of it in Dan's presentation, but if you look at our service industry, and you will see more and more coding being done by generative AI. So, and I think you will notice that it has to be obviously monitored and make sure that, because I'm sure most of you remember Y2K problem we all faced as an industry or globally, and I'm not predicting Gen AI is going to be like a big problem, but it's going to be instead a boon. But then how do you use it smartly, and a lot of those risks we talked about, So before I talk about the risk for the other firm or the industry, what we are doing is for our own company, we are saying, hey, how do we use Gen AI capability? And we have launched AI first as a way to all our enterprise customer to say, hey, we want to be an AI first company. So with that, what you need is obviously a great foundation of digital data. You need to obviously understand the value chain of what we do, how you do. And if you look at the Dan's presentation, a lot of it was to how you do. So in my own pet theme for Gen AI is all about how. How do you do what you do in your business, right? And it can extrapolate the how part with good data, good models, in a much more cleaner, better, faster way. So I think if you think about the risk, again, from two lenses, one is the operational risk, which is generally speaking the how. How do you conduct business? Who are your value chain partner? What do you do? So the operational risk on the how is, again, very easy to control if you have good data, if you have good amount of information, how you do business. And the second is the financial risk or the risk which is beyond your ability to think about it. I mean, this is, again, when you look at it from an insurance vertical perspective, those are much more controllable in my view, right? But operational risk is real. All the examples, Dan, you talked about is also in some way like how you do business today. And like you don't ask your Gen AI to show up emails on your behalf or so there are like how you do what you do. And the how part, you can harness it better. Now, what happens with Gen AI capability is you could harness it faster. You could respond. As I said, the customer service is a great example in my view as a user rather than a provider that I expect every insurance firm to have zero downtime on call center. In fact, I would even invite the CEOs to look at, okay, show me the report, like how many calls, what is the mean time to resolve or take a call. If it is more than 3 minutes, then you're not really harnessing the capability of technology, right? So the operational how part, the risk part, is easy to control. Of course, each industry, as well as within the industry, each companies are on different level. For example, if you take somebody like retail, like an Amazon will come to mind, or like a few other firms who are like very up there in terms of how they do retail business, compared to an insurance business or a banking, right? So somewhere you will find that there's a great opportunity for insurance industry to take advantage of the generative AI capability. But going back to your point, Paul, it's on the risk, operational risk. And because insurance industry is all about risk management, you guys should know this better as to how you do what you do. And then how do you have those gates in terms of the risk management experience? And there's enough and more technology to provide you with capability to manage your risk.
Well, this is good. I'll shift gears a little bit because we are sitting here in Hartford and we have the leadership from a significant number of companies in the community. Dan, I'll ask you first, which is, as you've gone in your journey and if you were to ask yourself, what could we be doing in the community to make the greater Hartford area the place to be if you want to do anything in generative AI related to the insurance space? What's your, what would be your campaign plan here for the?
Yeah, we certainly have inherent advantages, right? Not just the corporates, but yes, the corporates, but not just the corporates that we have here. Also the educational system, enormous opportunity there. Also the insurtech and scene that we've been building here over the last couple of years. The startups and the ecosystem of insurtech and innovation-related folks. In addition to that, I give you a story as an analog, perhaps, a quick story. So 6 years ago, I was traveling to San Francisco to meet with startups. And East Coast guy on the West Coast, I was up very early. And I turned on the local news in San Francisco, and the story of the day, the top headline was about an autonomous rideshare. So a vehicle that transports people around that had no driver in it. But that wasn't a story, because that wasn't a story in San Francisco. That wasn't news in San Francisco 6 years ago. The story was the autonomous rideshare had gotten pulled over by a police officer. And the conversation and speculation and questions that flowed out of that incident were really interesting and instructive. It was things like, well, how did the officer know what to do when he went out to the window? How did the car know that the police officer was trying to pull him over? Ended up being, I believe the officer ended up calling a number on the window and dealing with a call center for the company that manufactured the vehicle. And then I got into what about the safety of pedestrians? It was at night, this and that. What caused the vehicle to cause an accident? And the reason I bring that story up is, one, anytime you're talking about AI or emerging technology, the impacts go beyond the here and now immediate use case to societal implications, existential conversations. And the fact that San Francisco had an autonomous rideshare operating in the town, in the city, gave them a tangible opportunity to have experiences like that, to have conversations that followed like that. And so my sort of question for us is, how can we recreate that so that we can live and breathe it, not just talk about it as a community?
Well, thanks. Yeah, Kanan, we'll actually have the governor here later today. What would your advice be to the governor?
From my perspective, there are two parts to that, Paul, right? One is, of course, we talked about the talent. So I think, I think Dan's part is more about the usage. I would say this is more on the talent side. Like, how do you actually create more and more, focus around the AI capability within, let's say, working with the universities here? Because you already have enterprises here who are going to be the user. So in some sense, it's about the talent management or talent focus. And then the second is specific to insurance, because I think as we all agree that Hartford is the insurance capital of the world. So which means you got to find ways to expose let's say the contribution to the language models, the large language models, specific to, let's say, claims or underwriting or weather pattern, that would sit well within the world of insurance to say, hey, look, Hartford is doing this, so we should probably take advantage of what Hartford is doing. And then everybody, so it's almost like, people say Silicon Valley is all about the Bay Area, but then how do you then bring that back to, Hartford and say, hey, Hartford is doing it, we should be doing then the same thing. So I would say then look for opportunity to expose in a meaningful way to create these contribution to language models, large language models for specific underwriting or claims or any specific topic, which is very much an insurance topic rather than like what we heard, not the overall topic. Yeah? Those are the two specific way, you could actually put the Hartford back in the map of AI for insurance.
Well, thank you. And Chris, from all the work you're doing, this has got to be the toughest field to follow, because I swear every 3 months there's some evolution that sort of changes things. We hear, bigger models, not as good as the smaller models. Okay, I was making a big model, now I need to make a small model. If there were areas of expertise, general expertise, that you think we should be building here that would, let's be really, we'll take a long-term view in the space of, say, 2 years. Over the next 2 years, what would those areas of expertise be that you think would be important?
Well, full disclosure, my wife is an early childhood teacher for over 20 years, so we talk about education all the time at home. And she's talking about 2.5-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4 or 5-year-olds. Well, education about using this technology should absolutely start from the beginning, so folks the general population, society, doesn't get fooled by misinformation. Misinformation can lead, I'll just say this quickly, it can lead all the way down to civil unrest, which can then lead to commercial property and residential property damage, et cetera, business interruption. That said, I would say for directly address the short-term needs to your question, again, education. That was my segue to education. Education, you have major universities here. Education related to understanding better. We have lots of expertise here and during this whole day here about building great operational systems to make things work well and learn things and do things great. We need, I think, more and more expertise about validating information. I talked to you about that prompt window, going to 32,000 tokens. That allows the potential for an injection like malware injection attacks, they call them cyber attacks into those prompt windows. So we need to learn more about how to validate to block that in those windows. And we need to understand better how to better evaluate potential bias in the training data, potential bias in the refining data, potential bias, and I hate to say this, I've read some studies about that potential bias in the actual, the human aspect in the process of creating these large language models, the human aspect of that, where they do all that second check of the information. So we need expertise there. You could actually have insurtechs work on systems and tools that the insurance industry and the risk management industry can use in parallel with their generative AI systems to make sure it's on course. There's less of a chance for hallucination, less of a chance for drift, less of a chance for bias. Did you check all this? Yes, because I have these tools in place. And then you can also extrapolate that to your insureds, the customers. Is there something like that? Are there any tools like that that evaluates that your book of business in that sense? Those are the things that jump in mind. So education and also that insurtech angle, developing that research into those tools for keeping the generative AI, going in the direction we want it to go.
Now, well, great. We may have time for one or two questions, if anyone submitted them.
What are the key elements for an insurer to have in place for successful AI implementation?
Dan, we'll throw it to you.
Didn't hear that perfectly well. Can you repeat that?
I think basically the question was, what elements does an insurance company have to have in place before implementing a Gen AI program?
Sure. Definitely have to have governance and structure around guardrails. What is okay, what is not okay, what decisions need to get made at what levels, and a sense of risk management around the AI. In other words, kind of plotting, I'm not a management consultant, but I play one on TV, on a 2x2 grid. If you've got benefit on one axis, then you've got to have cost, complexity, and risk on the other axis, and understanding at what level of risk and what creates that risk do you take different precautions. And in addition, this is less on the risk side of it, there are hundreds of ideas that are going to come out around AI, Gen AI, et cetera. How do you prioritize them? How do you staff them? How do you take ideas from all different parts of the company, put them in one big queue, roll them together, and create homogeneity in terms of the themes of those ideas? There's a lot of work to be done, and those are some of the big rocks, I think, to accomplish.
Okay, Kanan, in the last few minutes, what's the answer? How did you do as a consultant, and what is the answer for prioritizing all the projects and ideas?
Again, I think I go back. I think most of Dan covered as already a company which is doing it, but I think broadly we have seen that the experience comes from user experience, because you want to show and tell. Adoption happens better if you have better story on the user experience. Then it pays for itself as an ROI, because if your user experience goes, your NPS goes up. So it's very easy to do the ROI on that one. Then you start on some other place. So I always say, focus on user experience to start with.
Thank you.
Tongue-in-cheek response to this, get a generative AI and ask the generative AI that question after inputting some of your company needs and see what it comes up with. Apparently, it's pretty creative. I like it.
That's true. That is true.
All right. I think that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. So if we give another round of applause as everyone exits the stage there. I don't know about anyone else, but is anyone's mind just going 9 million different directions? So, which I guess we could ask generative AI how to help us on the straight path there. But with that, we'll give our brains a rest and we'll refuel them a bit. We're going to take a short break. And while we do take a break, we're going to ask everyone can exit out the back exit there. But while you take a break, we have a couple activities for you. So first off, you may have already seen or you may have already taken photos at our social spot, which is sponsored by Voya. But that is directly out the doors there. So we encourage everyone to please go take a a stop there. Sorry, I definitely need a break here as well. And then we'd love for you to share your photos on social. Be sure to hashtag CTICS2023 when you post, and also please be sure to tag the CTIFS. Additionally, too, our coffee break is sponsored by CGI, who is also in the lobby highlighting some of their AI technology. And in addition to, we have great coffee, snacks, treats. So with that, we will begin our next panel discussion at 3:30, and we'll see you back in here for then. Thank you so much. Welcome back, everyone. Give everyone a moment to grab those seats. How were all the snacks? Did I see, was there cannolis? I don't know. I missed what was out there, but hopefully everyone enjoyed, and we welcome you back to your seats. And before we dive into the next panel, we want to touch on a couple items. And first, a huge part of keeping the insurance industry strong here in Hartford is the next generation of our workforce. And today, we are very happy to have many individuals join us as part of our Future Talent Program, which is sponsored by Symetra. So first off, thank you very much to Symetra for sponsoring this incredible program. This program allowed college students, many of your interns, and recent college graduates to join us at today's event here for free. And it's been incredible. We have students from UConn, from the University of Hartford, all being able to enjoy and really see the innovation that's happening here in Hartford within the insurance industry. And we really hope that today spotlights our region and excites them to keep them here working in our region so that all of us can fill our companies, our open jobs with this great future talent we have here. As we look to retain and recruit young talent, the CTIFS launched a series of videos to showcase why Hartford. And today we'd love to share one of these videos with you. So here we go.
Hartford is whatever you make it. Right? If you stay in your apartment, you never go out, then it's gonna be that. But if you venture out and interact with people, there's going to be so many different things that you are going to experience that you never thought you would experience.
Perfect. So we have a series of longer form videos that are targeted to different markets around the country in order to recruit young professionals here, who many of are filling jobs at each of your companies. So very excited about that. And next up is our second panel discussion of the day. We would like to say thank you to our panel sponsor, PwC. If everyone wants to give a round of applause, we'll get the afternoon snacks moving. Here we go. All right, so this was everyone, the morning audience, I was going to say, was much more excited than this audience here. I don't know, maybe the snacks were overserved during the break. But with this, would love to welcome our panelists to the stage and also our moderator, Shilpa Maniktala. Shilpa is a partner at PwC and also a member of the CTIFS Board of Directors. So please welcome them all to the stage.
Well, hopefully everyone grabbed some coffee. It's great to be with all of you today. A lot of great content so far that we've heard. In this section, joined by my panelists here, we're going to delve a little bit deeper into the topic of the customer experience, really looking at the intersection of AI and the human touch and how to maintain that right balance, and also look at, what does that mean for our workforce? What kind of skills do we need to arm our people with? So with that, I would like to just invite each of my panelists to briefly introduce themselves, and maybe I start with you, Mayank.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mayank Bhargav, and I'm with CGI. I'm with the company for about 18 years or so, and I'm based out of Hartford. I lead some of the innovation functions within our emerging technologies practice within the US, and right now the focus is primarily on cloud, AI, machine learning, and automation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Mers. I work at Travelers. I've been at Travelers for about 18 years now, leading everything from underwriting to customer experience to innovation, business intelligence. I am not an AI expert in the terms of data science or software engineering, but we think a lot about how we can apply AI and generative AI to the business, so I'm excited to spend some time with you on that. As far as customer experience goes, I started my career in the space of customer experience with technology companies out of Boston, and I will say one of the reasons I'm the most excited about this conversation is I really honestly believe since the advent of the internet, we haven't seen anything that has the biggest potential to impact the customer experience. So looking forward to a great conversation with all of you today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Campbell. I'm president of WellSpark Health. WellSpark is part of Emblem Health and Connecticut family of companies. I am here in the Farmington, Connecticut area. My experience with AI is limited to the Mother's Day poem my husband wrote using ChatGPT. So I'll say that what I do know is people and culture, and that's the angle I'll be sharing today. I'm a recovering HR leader. I like to say I led HR for many years for a large organization here out of Hartford.
Excellent. Well, let's jump in. So Mayank, maybe I'll start with you. So in your line of work, interacting and liaising with many carriers, I'm curious on where do you see this journey from an insurance perspective and the customer experience, and how do you see your clients approaching that real shift in mindset from traditional practices to being more AI-driven?
Yeah, a two-part question, Shilpa. So I'll talk about the state of adoption first, and then maybe go into optimization of the customer experience itself. So in terms of the adoption itself, there's been significant progress made. I think everyone can see that within their companies, but it's varied depending on the subsector, the size of the company and such. But one common aspect that we see is the focus on solving some of the critical use cases related to either customer experience or claims processing, automation, predictive analytics, fraud detection. Those are the use cases that we see that everyone's focused on. And it's also important to note that obviously the insurance industry is very heavily regulated and traditionally, I should say, a little bit conservative. So we are going to see cautious progress only to ensure compliance and also to mitigate any risks. So that's going to be the trend that we'll continue to see. Now shifting to the second part of the question about the optimization of customer experience, it's not just AI, but rather a blended harmony of different technologies, automation, cloud, ML, AI, all coming together. And the reason that I say that is, for example, you would use RPA to automate a lot of your technical and business processes. You would use cloud as an enabler to help you to really generate those compute and storage resources that are required for the AI models. You would use data analytics to analyze the customer trends so that you're able to really make sense of those patterns, those buying patterns or the behaviors that we see. And so all of those technologies need to really come together. Now, if we look at it from the way that the companies are really trying to implement it or the approach that we are really looking at, we have to focus on the customer. Getting a much deeper understanding of the customer itself, that's our starting point. And we can do that through surveys. We can look at the buying patterns, the historical data that we have, and then we get into the next step of really setting those clear objectives for us to focus on personalization and automation aspects. Again, then when you're doing that, you're able to really see what does success look like in measurable terms, right? Improved customer retention or increased customer satisfaction, better conversion rates, things like that. And then we move on to really the implementation part where we are able to bring all those technologies together, investing in AI, making sure that the right tools and technologies are brought to the different development teams. And the solutions are simple, right? What we see every day that the teams are working on. Chatbots, recommendation engines, predictive analytics, or even simple things as automated marketing emails. So those are the things that we would look at, and then follow it up with making sure that you're training the different models that are being built, but also training your teams to adopt AI and to keep moving forward. And I'll probably also say that it's important to make sure we are following up that development process with measuring and analyzing the different results and the data, because that's how we feed back into the model and are able to continuously optimize it. And it's going to be a continuous process. So we need to keep sharing the success stories that we generate, because that's what we need to feed back into the community and industry to make the next model even better.
Great. I really like what you said a lot there. I really like what you said, just starting with the basics of what's the problem you're trying to solve, what are the customers' expectations, needs, and really understanding that, and then building off of that. Maybe going a little deeper on that, Beth, we really know how this is going to be disruptive and really revolutionize, reimagine the customer experience. From your seat, what are some concrete, real-life examples of innovations you guys are developing, or where do you see this, going in terms of use cases?
Sure. And I love the fact that we've been on the stage all day today talking about the customer experience. I think sometimes how the customer's experience gets impacted is in ways that we might not expect. So I'm going to come back to that. But I think, Alan Schnitzer, our chairman and CEO, went on record saying, we believe at Travelers that AI and generative AI is going to be profound in terms of its impact on the economy, on the industry, and on our business. So it's as much about the big ways as the little ways. And I love what Dan said in the kickoff this morning, that we really need to look at every process and everything people do and say, how do we make it better with these tools? How do we give our people across our company, our industry, the tools they need to do their job better? So I think one, and when we start peeling that apart, you find little ways and big ways to really use the technology to change what you do. When I think about some of the areas that we're focused on in Travelers, we often talk about this idea of underwriting and customer experience being separate. They're actually very closely related, right? We have to have a frictionless underwriting process in order to ensure a great customer experience. So in personal insurance, some of the ways that we're using artificial intelligence in order to really drive change in that experience is to find those things that's very hard for the customer to tell us. It's very hard for us to get data on it, but it's critical for segmentation and risk. One of those areas is information about someone's home, right? And it turns out that images are much better at providing us with that data than words, people, and databases. So we've spent quite a bit of time over the last number of years to build out capabilities to use image recognition using external data sources on images from the sky to understand things like roof shape. Turns out if you ask a customer what their roof shape is, they can't tell you, right? They just don't know. We know in the industry and we care, but the average customer doesn't know if they have a hip roof or a gambrel. And as well as to better understand square footage, right? Turns out square footage is terrible in most databases. So those pieces of information that are hard to find, important for risk segmentation and critical to be able to streamline, how can we use these technologies to make that much easier? Similarly, in business insurance, we've seen areas where they've used AI to do a much better job classifying businesses, particularly small businesses. Inherently a hard thing to do. So how do we use these capabilities to be able to drive change in our business and make the process quicker and make it far less frictionful? And then lastly, and it was mentioned a couple times today, but I fundamentally don't think it's a mistake that it's where AI has been applied across most of the industry, is in the claim experience, which is really our primary, most important customer experience that we have. And the importance for a customer at that time is, and we've said it for a long time at Travelers, to feel safe, secure, and respected. And they want to make sure that their problem is understood and that they can get it handled fast. So there are a number of experiences that we've had across the business. Again, the idea is to change the equation from lots of conversations and dialogue to pictures How do you take a picture of a damaged vehicle? How do you take a picture of damage in your home and allow AI to give the data back that says, this is the damage, this is the estimate, here's how we can get you back whole quickly. So those are just some examples, but it all goes back to how do we make that a much less frictionful experience for our customers.
Fantastic. So Andy, maybe I'd love to get you to weigh in here. So, as I've been listening to Mayank and Beth, there's a lot of transformation here, but challenge ourselves. We're continuously innovating and changing. Do you view Gen AI and AI more broadly as any different than other technology, I'll call it transformations that we've been through?
That's a good question. I would say absolutely not. I think there's a lot of talk about it right now, but just like there was a lot of talk about bringing computers into the workplace many years ago, I don't think it's any different. I think we're living in a time when people are faced with a lot of uncertainty, just in general, economically, technologically, we'll say politically, and so just adding another layer of change in the workplace is something that we need to navigate as leaders of organizations, but I would say it's not any different than any of the things that we faced in the past.
Got it. And getting at that human element, one of the things that struck me as I was thinking about this panel is that for insurers, our customers are coming to us typically in times of need. It could be a health claim, it could be a loss of a family member. So these are moments of need and distress. So in that context, I guess, maybe I would ask you this, Beth, when you're thinking about your innovations and blending that human touch with the benefits of efficiency that come from the technology, what have been your learnings?
So, for me, it's the interesting thing is the biggest opportunity is to use it as a way to give better information to the folks that are having those conversations with our customers. A comment was made earlier by Kanan from Infosys of saying nobody should ever have to wait on the phone. I think that's right. But more importantly, when the phone gets picked up, the person on the other end of it needs to know who you are, they need to understand your problem, and they need to be able to help. We are an inherently complicated industry. Coverage is complicated, claims are complicated. Often the person on the other end of the phone, the person that is answering it from Travelers or from any of our competitors, has to go through tons of information in order to serve that up. This is really where I think we have a huge opportunity from a generative AI perspective, is how do we get the right information in the hands of the person that's picking up that phone and let them make a more informed and collective conversation with that customer. So I don't think it's taking away the human touch. I think it's actually just making it much better. And I think, what Andy said earlier is an important one. These are tools. These are tools to help us all do a better job at our jobs. I think even if we look at them, I see some of the folks from Travelers, right? Software engineers using tools to be better software engineers include those tools that have Gen AI. I just have a quick question. How many folks have used generative AI in some capacity, downloaded ChatGPT, used it in your job? Yeah, this is an unusual room. That's awesome. But I think, that is, for us, I think, as executives, that's the challenge, which is we need to use it ourselves to enable us to be better at what we do before we're going to be able to really understand how we can help our employees use these tools to be better at what they do. So, I think there's a real opportunity for us all to embrace and say it's not just frontline, it's backline, it's all of us. How do we use these tools to be better at what we do? And once we use them, we're not going to want to give them up.
That's right. Yeah, humanizing this, I can think of so many times when you're on with a carrier and trying to work through the automated prompts to get to that human. But now you think about, okay, when you do get to that human, the information at their fingertips and what that might do to transform that conversation. That's very helpful. Maybe pivoting a little bit to you, Mayank. In your experience, we've heard that AI can be incredibly smart, but shockingly stupid. And we've heard about some of the hallucinations and things that can go wrong. From your experience as kind of an implementer of the technology, what are some of the learnings and the pitfalls that the companies should avoid?
Yeah, so the integration has been transformative. The integration of AI has definitely been transformative, and we've seen a lot of success, but there's obviously quite a few challenges as well that we are dealing with and will continue to deal with. Some of the learnings, maybe people have already seen it, but I'll go through it just maybe by show of hands. Later on, I'll ask you, how many can relate to it. But one of the earliest learnings was data quality, right? Data quality is the most important, and what we have seen is with poor data quality, we get a lot of inaccurate or biased results. So it's important for us to make sure from the start we are focused on the quality of data. And that's just the nature of the solutions we are building with AI, that it is heavily reliant on the data for training and for the outcomes. The second aspect is the transparency and explainability. And what I mean by that is being able to explain to users or to regulators how we came up with that outcome. Because if you aren't able to do that, then how do you know you had an unbiased outcome? So it's important for us to focus on maintaining that transparency and explainability with all of our AI models. The next one is about continuous learning and improvement, and that's something that we see with machine learning models. Now, the AI models, we keep feeding data back to the systems, but then we also need to make sure that if there are any imbalances that we see, then we are using some mechanisms to correct those imbalances. So that's a critical piece as well. And then the last one, I think that's already shared, is the human and AI collaboration, which is obviously very critical. Yes, we can teach AI to do a lot of our repeated tasks, but the human element is required from the creativity standpoint, from the complex decision-making standpoint, and also being that guide from an ethical standpoint. Are we using AI in the right way? So those are some of the learnings that we've seen. From the challenges standpoint, I guess everyone's feeling this, the lack of AI talent itself in the market. It's the demand has outpaced the supply, and we are finding it harder and harder to hire or retain AI talent. So that's one. The other aspect is the cost of implementing AI is so high that and the companies are really struck with going for approvals every now and then because they need to execute these models which require high-end compute and large amount of storage. Yes, cloud is an enabler, but even the compute and storage in the cloud is going to be expensive for those kind of models to be run. And then the fact that we always rely on AI. Once we see one model working, let's expand it further. And so there's sort of an over-reliance on AI that is building, and we need to make sure we are assessing the data, we are assessing the models continuously, so that we are sort of making informed decisions, not just blanket choices in terms of, hey, let's use AI for this, let's use AI for that. And the last one that I'll say is about the regulatory compliance, which is going to be an ongoing challenge because of the GDPR regulations or other regulations in terms of the data security and privacy guidelines that we need to follow.
Yeah, thank you. You hit on a lot there. Definitely, there's been a theme of discussion around workforce and talent shortage in this space. And so maybe, Andy, I'll turn to you on this one. As an organization, how do you really build the culture around accepting this new technology? How do we help our employees really embrace this and see this as a benefit from your standpoint?
I'll start by just defining, well, what is workplace culture? Because I think there's a misnomer sometimes where we think that culture equals making people happy or that they're satisfied in their jobs, which is actually not the case. When we think about what is workplace culture, we're talking about shared beliefs, shared attitudes, shared values, and shared assumptions. That's really what it is. So when you make the tie to this conversation, it's how do we hire for people who have shared beliefs, shared assumptions, shared values, and shared attitudes, but also how do we cultivate that without feeding the fear, right, or fueling the fear of AI is going to displace my job. So when people come to me and say things like AI is going to displace my job, I try to help them reframe to, let's talk about, instead of displacement, how do we consider how to add value in our jobs alongside technology? How do we continue to build the skills and make our current skills more deployable in the new space that's coming? So it's, as leaders, reframing what's happening, but truth be told, it's really just about early and often communication. No involvement, no commitment. When we can bring people along in the conversation as early as possible, here's what we're trying, here's what we're seeing, here's what we're not seeing, here's why we're not trying, here's why we can't have you download it on your computer today, here's why we want you to try XYZ. When we start to bring people into the conversation, what at least I know to be true is that's how you build shared values, shared beliefs, shared assumptions, right, and shared attitudes. And the truth is that's where we're going to start to see people come along with us more quickly.
And what's your view on, the speed? Because I definitely hear that as another theme here. If we go too fast, too quick, how do we guard against doing that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought about this question a lot, and I don't know, is it really too fast? I don't think so. I think that if we don't keep up with the speed of technology, we won't keep up as business. So I don't think it's about how fast we keep up or how fast we move. I think it's how frequently and how honestly we communicate with the people who we're working with. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's just about communication. It's about bringing people along with us so that they feel like they're part of the transformation instead of handing them, a transformation sandwich and saying, we made this for you, go off and do it. They're more than likely not going to be as apt to eat it, right? So I don't think it's about the speed of transformation. I think it's about the frequency of communication and the honest and transparent leadership that you can create. Keep in mind, all people want is connection. That's it. They just want to feel like they have purpose and they're connected. And so when you can do that, regardless of what that change is, in this case we're talking AI, but it could be anything in workplace culture, that's where you're going to start to see people come along.
I think that's right. The part I worry about this time is us keeping up with them. And I really do mean that. I think people are going to come to work expecting access to the tools they need to do their job.
That's right.
And they're going to be looking at us saying, how do we get those tools in our hands so that we can do our jobs better? Because if I don't have access to those tools, I don't want to work for you anymore.
Right.
So I think speed is the issue this time. I mean, the Google demonstration, did you see how fast that thing learned?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, but it took me 2 years to teach my youngest how to tie her shoes. And it looked like that thing learned everything inside of 2 months. So I do think speed is a real thing that we have to keep up with. And I think to your point, it's really also making sure we're listening to our employees and saying, okay, are we pacing with them and making sure that they have access to the tools that they know are out there that can make them stronger, better, faster.
Shilpa, if I could, just on the talent conversation, I think it would be helpful. I think what we're finding is that the best talent actually expects innovation. I think that's where you're going, and it's important to say that. We're fearful of it as organizations, but there's just a reality that as an organization, if you want to attract the best talent, it's the right balance between good, often early communication, but just doing the things that other organizations, the most innovative organizations, are doing. That's how you're going to get the best people. And the best talent will go somewhere where they're going to find the most innovation, because that's what they want right now. And I think you make a really good point.
Yeah.
And I think it's a sort of a level playing field even now with any of the engineers that really want to reskill themselves and get into this space, because every cloud provider, for example, is offering free training courses to learn cloud, learn AI, learn how to use AI on-prem or on cloud, and then get to that level, and very quickly. You don't need a long learning time frame. I mean, you don't need 6 months or maybe even a month or 2 months of a period is sufficient for you to be able to grasp the terminologies, the aspects of processing the data. You have the tools available now. It's not that you have to go and actually create those tools in the first place. You're not writing detailed algorithms. You have tools to be able to help you to process the data. I think that's a big differentiator, and I think engineers should really be adopting that.
I agree. It's a business imperative, and that learning curve, that time is definitely condensed. So we're talking, a bit about what it looks like in terms of success on the employee workforce front. Maybe I can pivot a little bit back to kind of that customer experience, and maybe turn to you, Beth, and then Mayank. From your standpoint, what are the things that you're measuring? How do you assess the success of your efforts?
I mean, I don't think the measures of customer experience change because of generative AI. I think the measures are the same. What is our net promoter score? What's our customer satisfaction? What's their lifetime value? How long are we retaining them? I think the question now is, what can the technology do to help advance that? And I think there's a number of different areas. You mentioned transparency as we think about generative AI. I think in our industry, in insurance, we have the opportunity to improve our transparency with our customers because the explanations are so content intensive. It's not as simple as buying shampoo off the shelf. So the need for information about the product and what it is and what it does for you, there's just a tremendous opportunity just to start right there. How do we get better content in the hands of our customers? And we can do that almost immediately. The next area is, and people talk about this concept of hyper-personalization, but when we get to a place where we can actually communicate with a customer the way they want to be communicated with, and that's a critical thing, right? Like, if we can actually craft individual emails to that person based on how we know they like to communicate with, then we have a very different exchange, particularly when we're explaining things that are complicated. So I think that, first and foremost, our ability to continue to drive that engagement with our customers, and really help them understand the products they have and how they work for them. And that's true in life insurance or health insurance or property and casualty. These are products that people have to understand what they mean and why, and how they access them and how they use them. This technology opens up that opportunity for us in a way that it would have just been very complicated and expensive to do before. And if you want to test that out, because I literally just did this yesterday, I took some of our FAQs and ran it through ChatGPT and said, make this better. It was way better. And it's not because we don't have great communicators at Travelers. We have great communicators and marketers. It's just I don't have time to constantly be updating every single thing that we have out there. If we have tools that can help them do that faster and better and make it more relevant to the customer experience, I think there's just, unlimited opportunity for how we can show up for our customers better.
Sounds great. Mike, anything to add to that in terms of the opportunity and just...
I think, Beth, you referenced some of the imaging that's used to also help with, identifying how much risk is involved. But there are other areas such as claims assessment automation, where you can actually use computer vision and NLP to assess how much property damage has been there, or what's the injury that's been caused, and then be able to help with claim processing. Other areas, cybersecurity, of course, is another area where we're able to use different measures to protect the personal information, PHI, PII, and such, and also prevent any data breaches. And then another area that I think all of us must be familiar with is telematics and IoT, where a lot of the insurers are partnering with different companies to use AI to assess the data that's generated from vehicle sensors, to assess the driving habits, and based on that, adjust the premiums or offer bigger discounts, make it like an incentive for different people. And I go through that too, using the phone. My daughter's sitting in the car and she's saying, can I use the phone? And I say, no, it's going to impact my score. So, it's a fun thing.
Nice job recognizing that. Excellent job.
Yeah, so those are some of the areas.
Oh, that's great. Well, I know we've covered a lot of ground here, and I did save a few more questions, but maybe it'd be a good natural spot to break for some questions for the audience, if there are any.
In what areas do you see the most valuable interplay between human expertise and AI's capabilities?
Maybe Beth, I'd start with you.
I mean, I'll start. I think there was a conversation here that touched on that. I think it's in two areas. One is in underwriting, particularly in those areas where we do individual underwriting, right? Large businesses. You know, there's so much that we have to rely on the human in some of these really complicated risks. But having that collaboration with the machine that can search through every other risk we've ever seen like that and present that information back to the human underwriter, there's just huge opportunity there for collaboration. And then, you know, the other one we've talked about quite a bit there, which is in the claim experience, both in terms of being able to leverage capabilities that allow the claim adjuster to understand quickly the nature of that risk or that loss through images, because a picture does tell 1,000 words. So why put the customer through that? But being able to let the claim handler really interact with the machine in a way that helps them understand the size of the loss, the potential other risks associated with that loss, and deliver on that customer experience. I think those two are huge. I don't know if you would add to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe add or build upon the claims processing part. Data inaccuracies that we keep seeing, those can be supported by AI in terms of identifying, oh, I see this pattern, this data is missing here, or this data is inaccurate, you know, so let's maybe use similar data for comparison purposes and such. So that's another use case to build on that.
Mm-hmm.
Great question. Any others queued up?
How can insurance companies prepare their workforce for the integration of AI technologies, and what sort of training or upskilling programs are most effective?
Andy, maybe I look to you to start us off.
I can kick us off probably with the first part of that question. We should also say there's a real person saying these questions.
I know, I'm like, weird.
It's not bartered. Yeah.
Not AI. There's a real human back there saying those questions. Nice guy. I'll kind of tackle the first side of it. I hate to oversimplify it, but all roads for me lead back to how are we communicating what we're doing in the first place? That's the first thing. So what are we doing to communicate where we are? What are we doing? And that's ultimately going to be your biggest talent retention tool, frankly, because what Beth brought up is critical. How are we keeping the best talent and retaining the best talent and attracting the best talent? Of course, it's to say all the things that we are doing that are exciting and that are innovative. So I think the idea of communicating early and often is big, bringing people in as part of the conversation, which I mentioned earlier. I think that's also a big part of it. The other thing I'll say is, there's just a reality to what's happening in the world. I mentioned this earlier, in uncertainty. And when, in absence of information, people will make up their own stories. That's what happens when people don't have information. So how do we over-inform so that people feel like they have the information to dispel what could be out there as myths, gossip, or any uncertainty that exists, in order for people to feel like they're prepared for whatever change is coming? This is basic change management. So I would argue that it's not any different than what you're doing for any other change management initiatives. I think the conversation around AI is often centered around the technical innovators of the company. So bringing along your human capital partners who have the experience in global, scalable, real strong change management strategy is probably the place to start. In relationship to training, I may not be the best person to opine on that, but maybe one of you have better perspective.
There is ample of free training that's available, and also labs that are available for anyone who wants to try out, who wants to take a set of data and process it through the different models. You also have pre-built models that are readily available for a lot of the different use cases. So you don't have to necessarily start from scratch in terms of defining the models and the outcomes that you expect. So a lot of help is available. I would encourage everyone to start looking at AWS, Azure, Google Clouds. AI capabilities. So all three cloud providers offer great training programs as well, and all of them are self-paced. You necessarily do not have to go and sit in a classroom. All of them are available online. And apart from that, get your hands dirty. It doesn't mean that you have to be an engineer. It's very simple, straightforward, based on point and click kind of features to be able to run different models, upload data. Of course, you need to format the data and such, but that's the easier part of it. So just get familiar with those kind of training programs and put your teams through it. Everyone in every company has a learning portal where you can define the curriculum, and you can easily do that, tie it back to those trainings that might be available. And just to add to what you were saying, Andy, there's also the aspect of training people on the fairness or the inclusivity or the bias mitigation. How do you make sure that people can detect those aspects within the models, within the data or the outcomes, and then be able to correct them by using different methods?
Great. So maybe with about 10 minutes or so, we've been talking a lot about, I think, current state and some things that are in the pipeline. I guess as you cast this net forward, looking down, 5 or so years, where do you see sort of the uses of AI, and how does that evolve, over time in the realm of customer experience?
I mean, I'll start, and feel free to jump in. If we're looking 5 years, I'm gonna say there's no task or process or part of the value chain for a customer experience that won't be touched by generative AI.
Yeah.
I really do honestly believe that. There's some folks up at Harvard that have created a company called I think it's GAI Insights, but they use this term called WINS, which I love frameworks that I can easily understand. And it's words, images, numbers, and sounds. And their thought process is, if your business operates heavily in those areas, you will be significantly disrupted by this technology. And their matrix is that, and how well your data is digitized. And I think that in the insurance industry, we've done an amazing job over the last 5 years of really moving our information into an accessible place where we can get at that data. So I don't think there's any part of that experience that isn't going to be touched by the technology. I don't think there's tasks that we do. I don't think if we're doing it right, if we're adopting the technology in the right way, we're reimagining every single customer experience process that we deliver and saying, how do we make this better? And hopefully at the end of the day, what that looks like are customers that are well informed by the products and services that they purchased. They feel like they've been handled to the best of our ability from a claim experience process. We feel like we've appropriately rated and underwritten that risk and are effectively managing the risk, and we're doing it efficiently. There's not, that should be and how it should feel. And I think those areas that we've already honed in on are the areas that we're going to see go first, but I don't think there's a process that we should think will be separated from the technology enabling that experience to be better.
Yeah, and completely agree with that. Use cases that you mentioned earlier to hyper-personalization, predictive customer support. What issues can we expect from the customer, from this particular customer, based on the analytics that we have run on the cases that he has pending, for example, right? Those kind of use cases, predictive AI analytics, product recommendations, that's already happening. So those kind of use cases we'll continue to see. But again, going back to the point that I was mentioning earlier, just because we are quite regulated in the insurance industry, we are still going to see cautious movement towards the adoption of so much AI. So it's going to be still limited from the ethical boundaries, and I think we all have a part to play in that.
And appropriately.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think that we talk a lot about regulation in this industry, and it's there for a reason. And I think the industry itself does a very good job of self-regulating as well. How do we make sure that we're using the tools and ensuring at the end of the day we're doing it to deliver better value, better customer experience, better products. So my sense is we'll find the right way to work within that.
Excellent. Well, maybe I'll just invite my panelists to give any more final thoughts. Andy, maybe I'll start with you, just on kind of what you've learned and heard today, and just any other thoughts for our audience.
Yeah, I'd love to just share that I think it's important that we don't undervalue the power of cultivating an employee's well-being through all of this, because the idea of mental health, just in general health, well-being in the workplace, it's costly, of course, for employers, and certainly all of us are included in that. And so it's costly as a problem, and I think it's something that we need to consider as we do bring in big change, and technological change like this is significant. So something to consider is how are you supporting your employees' whole person's health, and what are you providing as part of the training, I'll call it, to whatever the new world looks like 5 years from now.
Excellent.
That's great. There's two things for me that I think a lot about with this technology. We mentioned it before. One is speed. I'm trying to think of technologies that I've witnessed take off as quickly as this. It's hard for me to imagine any others, right? We got 100 million ChatGPT users, 1 billion visits a month, a $30 billion cap, and they launched in November. So the speed scares me. Like, how do we make sure we keep up with it and we meet those needs given all the constraints that you talked about? And then on the bias side, we talk a lot about the risks of bias. I hope we get to take advantage of where the technology can actually help us with being more open and more diverse, right? The speed with which we can deliver solutions that are multilingual, that are better tailored towards different cultural needs and desires, we should be able to do that much better and much quicker in ways that we have wanted to and haven't been able to. Our ability to get insights from populations that we don't necessarily have on staff, just, for better or for worse, like, how do we use the tools to increase the way that we can reach to a broader and more diverse audience? Because I think there are real ways there. So I understand all the risks on the bias side. I would also hope we're having the same conversation of how do we do the other side of it and use the technology to really help advance diversity and inclusion across our business.
Very nice. Yeah, I'm just very excited with the next phase, the 3 to 5 years, how we can really help our companies, also our staff, the engineers that we have. Everyone's been heads down programming, but now the next wave is all about using the different tools that are there. So we've been able to, at least within my practice, we've been able to embrace all of these technologies, and I encourage all of my members to go and spend time trying to investigate a little bit more about what are the different use cases that they can think of. Be creative in terms of what parts of those use cases can be automated, not just with AI, but just plain automation using RPA, for example, for some of the technical and business processes, as simple as that. So just being able to use this era to really help automate a lot of the functionality so that we can focus on the customer-centric issues and the business areas. We talked about hyper-personalization. How do we get to that phase of hyper-personalization if we are always going to be thinking about, I'm going to be out of my job? The fact that the people are going to be out of a job means that there's another opening for another job or other areas that we are looking at. We talked about using images for assessment of the property damage and things like that. So processing all of those, all of that is so wonderful for us to be able to build those kind of solutions. So I'm just very excited. Maybe it's just the technologist in me. So. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much to our panelists. It's very inspiring, and I feel like this is us, going back in time. I watched the Jetsons as a kid and see where this can unfold, and just we're embarking on that new journey. So thank you so much to our audience and very much to our panelists for this excellent conversation. We look forward to continuing the dialogue.
All right, so as I explained to the audience, we are here to have a chat, or you two to have a chat, based on your global perspective on this very interesting topic that we've heard. And I'm going to start off then, without further ado. So Gen I is on every, and I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to queue up questions, but then I'm going to let the conversation continue between you two. So Gen I right now, it's on every leadership team. A lot of businesses are touching it. In your opinion, what is the industry that's first in line on this? Who's adopted it faster and is looking like they're going to adopt it faster? I'm going to start with Naveen.
I'll go first. Folks, the reason we're late is because this was advertised as a fireside chat and we couldn't find fire back then. So apologies for that. But to the question that Susan asked, who's taken it on the fastest? It's a pretty secular trend. I don't know that there's one industry that jumps out, but there is a theme that surprised me, and I want to share that with you. Industries that have had a higher burden of regulatory approval have actually been ahead. So the insurance business, healthcare, life sciences in the R&D domain, all of those industries that have had to do a lot of paperwork and processing and filing and meeting the bar for filing paperwork in time have actually jumped out further ahead than I thought they would. That's been an interesting trend. And I think part of it goes back to, the documentation burden is high and large language models are great at summarizing documents and finding insights and trends and patterns and variances across documents. So that's been that's sort of explaining it. But the other thing that I think is still going to happen is industries that are data rich. Again, insurance is a specific example, right? The last panel just made this point as well, that data is sort of the bedrock of all of this. So industries that are data rich, I think, have a little bit of an advantage when it comes to building out these models to take advantage of the capabilities that they offer and then ultimately changing how they're viewed by their consumers, their employees, competitors, all of them. So, Dan?
Yeah, totally agree. I think that generative AI as a whole, like I said earlier, it's a combination of a few things. One is the technology, and the second thing is the set of processes and tools that really surround the technology. And we shouldn't ignore that because, to your point, the processes are shared across industries. The benefits and the ability to generate strategic competitive advantage is shared across industries. And so when you get the benefit of an individual experience where a role, a product manager, a project manager, a software engineer, or whatnot, that's a horizontal. And that person specifically can benefit from generative AI. And as a collective, then you get a technology as a chatbot or search experience or all these other capabilities to really be present into business processes and give a strategic competitive advantage to a company. So I see that in two perspectives. Individually, how can people take advantage of a technology? And as a collective, how can organizations take advantage of it? And we're seeing these two patterns going in parallel.
Yeah. Now, as you were saying that, something came to mind. The applications of generative AI in some sense are limitless because the way I've realized it, a good way of thinking of it is any task that requires the ability, the need to think and process and look at information is a good candidate for a task that can be made better with generative AI. So I think you're right. It's taking that broad horizontal view and identifying tasks where some degree of thinking and summarization and searching and human intellect is required. All of those are good candidates, I think, for deploying generative AI.
So insurance, you spoke about that. Where are some of the greatest opportunities for the insurance industry? Dan, you mentioned that, but go deeper.
Yeah, so within the context of insurance, there's this decent amount of processes, and I think a number of panelists.
Lots of data.
Data, yes, exactly. So processes are related to the data, and the data has a vocabulary. That vocabulary is very specific to the domain and the industry. And so what we're observing now is that we have these general purpose models that are trained across a large pool of data that has seen basically the internet. But there is this massive advantage of bringing that entire corpus and that entire knowledge over to the industry and then find the patterns, the processes, and the engagement model to really bake those into use cases that matter to the organization. And so some of the use cases that we've seen really take advantage of this entire ecosystem in the insurance world is in underwriting and also support. So when a customer comes to a support experience, they really need an answer, and they need an answer fast. They don't necessarily need to talk to someone. So giving that answer in the shortest amount possible is something that we've seen really drive the NPS, like it was mentioned earlier, higher. The other thing is, well, wouldn't it be better if we actually went to the customer rather than the customer coming over to us? So if there's a change in the policy, if there's a benefit that may or may not have changed, would it be an opportunity to go to the customer proactively with a personalized experience? And that could happen because there's this back process that leverages generative AI that processed that large amount of data and really generated some insights or guidance that would guide an underwriter or someone else or a support person to really engage with a customer in a personalized manner. So we're seeing this life cycle of customer-initiated interaction and also insurer and or underwriter-initiated interaction back to the customer. And then the data is the underlying power source for all of that.
The data is the foundation, you're right. But I also think there's another theme to think about. About 10 years ago, maybe, there was the emergence of the digital natives, right? Started off in banking. Fintechs were going to disrupt JP Morgan Chase. Insurance techs followed soon after. If the Gen AI train stays true to projections, I think there's going to be this next generation of AI native enterprises. And the common starting point is going to be the one that has the most data, inherently builds better models that have better understanding of customers. And these new AI native firms are not going to do what the previous generation did. The previous generation took existing processes and digitized them. I think the opportunity here for new companies is to start with a clean slate, right? How would you, if any of you wanted to start up a new insurance tech today, what is it that you would start off with? And if the answer is, I'll just take yesterday's processes and make them faster, fair. That's one way to do it. But I think the ones that really win are going to be ones that reimagine how they engage with customers and how they actually rewire all of the underlying systems. Now, that is a tall order. I'm not saying it's easy, it's going to be done tomorrow, but I think that's where the real opportunity is. That's where, in some sense, we had the internet and all these valuable .com firms emerged out of it. I think in some sense, Gen AI is going to lead us up to that. There's going to be a cohort of companies that emerge from this set of technology developments that are going to have trillion-dollar valuations. So
the size of the pie is going to increase.
Yes, absolutely.
So when is now, right? When is now? I'm hearing you say, are things happening already that should not have been, it's kind of in the past already? When we first had the first iteration of Chat GPT, where are we today? And is there a bigger opportunity? And should we look at that? How do we look at that in the past going forward?
I don't know.
Safe to use that? Is it safe to use that technology to go forward? Or are we already forward?
I think you have to go forward. Now, there's obviously, the previous panel spoke about this, right? The need to be careful about this, the need to be smart about how much risk do you take on. Again, you're in the risk management business, so that's something that I think the audience inherently gets. But it's also about taking a little bit of a creative leap. I'll go back to that AI native thing that I spoke about, right? You're not going to be able to, if you're just looking to optimize processes that exist today, they'll give you benefits. But if we're stopping at, we'll take a chatbot and we'll train it, it's not really going to change how your consumers and how your buyers experience your firm. So I think there is a little bit of a need. Dan's example of showing the visuals communicating, right? I think that's a good way to think about it. So don't just try and take existing processes and throw Chat GPT or Gen AI behind the scenes. See if you can think about fundamentally reimagining those conversations. That's where the real value, that's where the real leap forward, I think, is going to come from.
100%. The way I put that is technology, patterns that we recognize, because it asks when it's now. I believe that there is an evolution, right? So many things are moving around in many directions now, and one of the things that is incumbent upon all of us is to find the patterns that stick. And finding the patterns that stick in my mind is a matter of associating all the moving parts with two things. One is the value to the business, and the second thing is responsibility, to your point, right? So we can encapsulate responsibility into making sure that the systems are reliable, i.e. the technology is reliable, and also that the systems do the things that we want the systems to do, which is a bit of a challenge with this space at this time. And the second thing is to associate that with the value to the business, i.e. find the POCs, the low-hanging fruits, the different simple applications that you can use and leverage today that would help educate the business value, essentially. And there's this effect, second-order effect, where really engaging with that technology feeds back. And so there's this feedback loop where the more you understand how to engage with the generative AI as a collective, the more ideas come around. And because that system is geared towards helping you find new ideas and ways to engage with it, I believe that we stand on the cusp of this massive opportunity where we actually don't know exactly where we could take this technology. But yes, so there's an evolution, and we need to find the patterns that stick as a value to the business.
So I like this question because it follows it, and I don't think we have an answer. So we talked about this being an opinion, but who's driving it? Is it, I always say the proverbial dog that wags the tail that wags the dog. Who is driving the adoption of AI? Is it from an insurer's perspective? I'm going to start with you, Naveen. Is it the customer, because they're already in there and they're dabbling and the insurer's looking at the risks associated with this? Or in some cases, the insurer getting in front of it, make sure they understand what's happening, working with partners such as Google to get ahead of the what's next. So I don't know if we have an answer, but I'd love both of your opinion on that.
I think consumers it's an interesting situation because the previous panel, Beth spoke about this, I think. There's such a big difference in the experience that we all have as employees. And I'll start with the employees and we'll go to consumers in a second. But the Sunday evening experience I have at home with my gadgets and my devices is so different than the Monday morning experience I have when I walk into the office. And I work at a tech firm. You work at a tech firm. So I think it's something that's somewhat common, right? So at some level, I think all of us, regardless of the role we play, employer, consumer, or the insurance firm, the expectations continue to rise. So that's one. Two, I think consumers are more and more, you saw how many people raised their hand when someone asked, how many of you played with ChatGPT, right?
Right.
This is an audience from large firms, and 3/4 of the audience has had experience with it. So I think in some sense, consumers are going to expect and demand that the companies that they engage with start to take advantage of these new technologies and this new tooling. If you don't offer it up, you're going to be seen as a company that doesn't get it. There was a point made earlier about employees and how they're expecting to see the latest and greatest in innovation. And think about this. I have a 19-year-old and a 14-year-old. The 14-year-old does half of his homework using ChatGPT. And we can argue about is that right or wrong, but the way I look at it, there's a whole generation that's being raised with these tools at their disposal. It's second nature to them. That generation's going to go to, they'll go to college, they'll go to work, they'll show up. And if we offer them an environment that doesn't give them access to these tools, I don't know that we're going to be able to hold on to them. So a little bit of a detour from your question on, should the insurance company drive it or should the consumer drive it? I think ultimately human expectations will be that businesses will pick up the speed. Otherwise, you'll be that company that still has a phone number in the yellow pages but don't have a website, and I don't know how those guys are doing these days. So.
Totally agree. I think that driving is an interesting concept in this space because the technology is ubiquitous. And it's going to only be more and more ubiquitous. There are some things that are still challenges today, things like hallucination and ensuring, again, deterministic outcomes out of what you get out of these models. But these are active domains of research. So there's research going there, and then there are we're actively publishing in this space and then turning that into technology. Now, where I join your point is that the consumers will ideate using generative AI. The consumers would know which questions to ask using generative AI. the consumers will get access to information, even whether it is with ChatGPT or BART or general purpose consumer tools. But there is this effect of consumers leveraging the tool and then coming to the insurers with some expectations of the same level of access to the toolkit, the language. Someone mentioned shared understanding and then shared expectations. So I think that there will be this feedback loop of shared use and shared understanding at different levels. Now, for the enterprise, the most innovative ones, in my opinion, or the winning ones, would be those that can drive while aligning those technologies to business values and revenue streams potentially, which is an open question at this point.
Yeah, not easy to do either. So let's discuss adoption again. Let's keep going on that. And you both represent vast groups of external stakeholders. And you talked a little about value chain in your presentation, Dan. So what advice would you give to navigate AI for the adoption of with stakeholders, your customers, have large value chains behind them? What do you say? What's the first step?
Exactly. So that's somewhat related to the conversation right now, which is what we're seeing is a lot of interest, right? So companies from the boardroom to the innovation centers to the COEs, you name it, everyone is interested in Gen AI. And it's been the case for almost a decade. Everyone has been interested in AI and machine learning. So what we see is that there are many companies that have some levels of applications of machine learning and AI and Gen AI. There are different levels of investment in terms of the folks that have a team that is trained and that has access to the technology and that is able to iterate faster. There are challenges around understanding what that means in terms of the control framework or the risk within different companies and different industries. So adoption is a matter of balancing the push-pull between innovation and the business dynamics. So where we stand is that we see a number of patterns, and I will summarize that in three things. One, like I said earlier, is technology, understanding the technology. The second thing is identifying the patterns. We have seen some patterns, for example, the input-output relationship with a chatbot. It's okay if the chatbot can analyze an entire pool of data and then give you patterns and give you other AI or automation types of skills, but at the end of the day, the way you interact with it is through a chat experience. So that's a pattern. The other pattern is the search and discovery and asset discovery and all the other things that you can do within that space. And those are horizontals. They apply to different industries. So going from understanding the core value of the technology, identifying the different patterns that can help you apply early stage, easy to complete use cases across the board within your organization, and eventually understanding what is the engagement model that helps you not to break the bank, because you can use the most expensive trillion parameters model out there, or you can use a simpler model that is slightly tuned to your use case and domain with 100 samples and gets the job done. And that really requires working with a partner that can help you move faster. And what we've seen is that when you get these three things together, you can get a decent use case within your organization done within 6 to 8 weeks.
It's also sometimes, you can spend a lot of time thinking about what first step to take, and sometimes it's just easier to take that first step. So I think you're right. The bar to access this tooling is not that high. The risks are high, but you have to be smart about what you use these tools and the technology for. But I think it's a little bit about getting started and not obsessing about finding that right, perfect first step. You'll find that once you get started, your understanding and your level of comfort and your ability to think of other scenarios where this can be deployed to drive business outcomes, to your point, that it's going to multiply. It's impossible to wait. I wouldn't recommend waiting and saying, well, let me come up with a list of 500 use cases, and once I have all 500, then I'm going to go get started. I would rather go in the other extreme and say, find 5, find 10, where you can see some measurable value, where the risk of failing isn't going to be humongous, and get started with those. And I think that's probably a much more pragmatic way of getting started than waiting for this encyclopedia of use cases to be blessed by someone else.
I'd say upload your assets to a vector store or an enterprise search database, connect that to a a large language model that is a generative AI-enabled large language models and ask it what are the 5 top ideas that you may want to work with. You will be surprised.
Something you could take back to your stakeholders, your customers. So tell me, do you have any more use cases, any ideas on what to do for, I mean, we're here today with insurance industry representing just a vast degree of different businesses. I'm thinking I heard you take the step.
Yep.
First, small versus large, just take a step, number one. Time is money, number 2, so don't wait, because I think, Naveen, we discussed when is now.
Yep.
What about the internal enterprises? What about your internal employees? What's the best, is there a better approach to start telling your customers what to do and what not to do, and how to gauge their enterprise, their internal employees on AI? Do you have any answers on that yet?
Your employees are going to be your biggest champions for this. Once your peers, others within your firm, start to see the value that can be realized by deploying this tooling along with what they do, right? This is going to make their lives better. You'll see that they come up with better ideas than you could come up with. And I'll speak from our own experience as a firm. We work with clients across the globe, and we said, well, one approach to coming up with ideas where clients can deploy Gen AI is go to insurance, find 10 use cases, go to banking, find 10. That's great, but we're only going to end up with 50, 60, 70. What if we turn this around and turn it over to our employee base and run this, we ran an innovation contest. They came up with 35,000 ideas. I'm not going to tell you all 35,000 were good. Some of them were just like, I don't know what they were thinking. But there's so much good in there because think about it, it's now 35,000 minds, each with their unique context and unique experiences servicing our clients, understanding their data, their contexts. So what that team came up with is so much more powerful than what we would have been able to do if we did this top-down. So I would strongly advocate for making employees your internal champions because that's where you're going to see value realized the most quickly. And that's going to allow the crowdsourcing of ideas on where to deploy this and how to realize value.
Agreed, 100%. I have 3 dimensions through which I see this heavily valuable for employees, and it's been a case in my team and our partner teams, whether these are customers or partners. One is productivity. I spoke about it slightly earlier. How do you bring different stakeholders, internal stakeholders around the table working on the same project, but each of them interacting with Gen AI with their own personal interest in mind, so to say. But the project manager asks project managers questions. The software engineer asks software engineers questions. The product manager asks product managers questions. So things like market analysis, things like competitive analysis, all of these different things that you may do with a bit more time, but with having this highly skilled assistant working with you, you can probably execute a lot faster. And so what we see just within that context of productivity is that the whole becomes more than the sum of its parts, right? Because everyone is moving faster, and if you're coordinated along the same project, productivity really, really goes high. So that's one of my favorite applications of Gen AI for a family of connected employees around the same purpose. Finding the same purpose is another question, but once that is connected, that works faster. The other one is on document generation and document processing and understanding and analysis. So there's been this pattern where a pool of data from within the organization, this is really my favorite use case, where the data can be pulled together, put in a store of different, stores of different forms, and really having Gen AI to access that data store and provide that information with simple interfaces back to users. Now, what you would see is sometimes there is someone within the organization that has the answer documented for the question you have, and being able to access that pool of information, or even having a recommender system that is Gen AI based, that writes snippets and then connects that to the provenance of that information over a question that you have, and it's a natural language based question that you're asking to that knowledge base, is extremely powerful. We see that in customer support when someone picks up the phone and has the customer's context, but also may or may not know the answer, and by asking a natural language question to a bot, having that answer coming out of a pool. So that is, again, fast productivity, access to a large pool of data. And the third aspect that I've seen this play a magnificent role is in product ideation, product development, finding new products for the organization, finding new opportunities. And I've also seen a lot of benefits there.
I've got two examples I want to share, both connected to your second swim lane. Now, these are things that we did at our firm. One's serious, one's not, so I have to warn you. The one that's more serious. So as a publicly traded firm, we go through earnings. At the end of earnings, all the analysts that cover us will publish reports. Analysts love to write reports. So literally, our CEO would get, and this is exaggeration, he reads things online, but he would get a stack of paper about this thick every quarter that had all of the analyst coverage on Cognizant. While we were tossing around ideas, we said, well, what if we take those reports and build him this query engine that allows him to ask questions? What are analysts saying about my firm's performance? How am I doing against competitors? What are the common themes that JP Morgan Chase and Barclays have identified as potential risks to our business? So part of the reason we did that is because we wanted him to come over to our side, and we figured, I can stand up and keep doing PowerPoints until the projector lights go off, or I can give him something to play with. We took that approach. It worked well. He's one of our biggest supporters in the firm now. The not so serious one, there were, on a large team, there's always going to be people that are not so comfortable touching and playing around with things that are net new. Within our own team, we started doing this silly thing of writing out-of-office Outlook messages using ChatGPT in the voice of your favorite fictional character. So everyone on the team would write, there's a Shakespearean out-of-office message. There's a Mr. Spock out-of message. There's an Elon Musk out-of-message. People just, and the goal was to get them familiar. The goal was to go it's not so bad. Play around with it. It'll help you get something going. And obviously builds a team, brings the team together, and you go from those small little things as starting points.
I've learned that it's fun. And number two, so don't be afraid of it. Number two, PowerPoints are going to be a thing of the past.
Hope and prayer, yes.
Well, we hope so. We all can hope so. But I appreciate that in the kind of the inside, just adoption. We're all doing it. And I think you heard one of the panels say that, but that does bring risk. So you're offering your employees the ability to do something, to get acquainted with the intelligence, but yet, and so you bring that outside your employees to your customer base and stakeholders. Does that open the risk? Is the risk too great? Or in your opinion, is it not too great? Or is that why you're going to build all those protections in there?
Look, if you do it without knowing what you're doing, the risk is tremendous. So I think it is important to be aware of the risk.
Have the experts
there
by your side.
We've all read the story about how Samsung uploaded files onto whatever LLM they did, and that was product specs, and they got leaked. So obviously, none of us want to do that. But I think models have also evolved, right? By the way, I think Dan did a fantastic job explaining generative AI today. So if you saw one of his models around security and privacy, you'll notice that the models themselves are frozen. So they're not taking your data and learning it and then turning it over to your competitors. So models have evolved, security standards and guardrails have evolved, but they're not foolproof. I wouldn't go into it with my eyes closed. So it's important to be smart about how you use these things.
100%. I also think that asking the right questions within the context of risk would probably lead to new technology requirements. How do we encode these risk factors back into the technology? Either back into the models or back into the surrounding tools that the models leverage for their operations. And so that's a big question for us because internally at Google as well, so I've done the research to production life cycle quite a few times. And one of the major things that drove the adoption inertia for many applications within the organizations were well, this is helpful, this is powerful, but we can't use it because of all of these different governance policies that we have that are not answered by this model at this point. And that's only when you look at the model as this unique entity that has to answer all of these questions. But then there is this entire ecosystem of tool use and grounding and getting the model to check with a facts base before answering questions that really gets you closer and closer to an ability to answer some business level risk questions. So I find a duality there where what kinds of questions can you ask? How do you formulate these questions within technology constructs? How do you implement these technology constructs within the models, either the model themselves or the tools that the models use? So there's that life cycle again that we're working towards that.
And as you go through that, it seems like you minimize, the risk goes down a little bit.
Exactly.
More and more.
Exactly. Yeah, and working on a spectrum, identifying what are the use cases that are really, really low risks, that are answering some questions that are not business critical, and leveraging those to play with a tool because, again, the patterns are the same. You ask a question, you get an answer. But then once you identify those, then within the controls of a risk framework, you can start moving towards some more critical use cases.
So the last question I have, should there be rules on the adoption of Gen AI? I know you're smiling already. Is there a level playing field on this too? So again, it's a little hypothetical because we are embarking on rules right now. There's a lot of players putting rules out there. And what in your, I guess it's really, Naveen, should there be rules and is there a level playing field? I'll give you those two parts of the question. Then
so I think two different questions, right? So should there be rules? I think it'd be a good idea to have some common ground rules that we all agree upon. Now, we see this in different geographies as well, right? So if you look at Europe, for example, Europe's taken this approach of centralizing all of the rules around AI and having the European Union issue it. Over here in North America, it's a little bit more functional. So the NAIC, the states, the FDA, the SEC, everyone's got their own set of rules around this. But I think the fundamental point still remains. We do need some rules because, remember, this is not the same as displaying an image on a social media site.
Yeah.
Now these images are very realistic. These images it's not just limited to images, it's videos and voices. And The Economist, I think about 3 weeks ago, had a cover that really caught my eye. It said, AI voted in the last election. So think about that, right? Not to make any of this political, but that's what the potential impact of this is if we don't put some degree of rules around this.
Okay.
So I do believe there's got to be some rules around this for sure. If you want to take the level playing field,
I agree that there should be some rules. The ability to create rules now is probably an open question because the field is nascent fairly. It's evolving very fast. Innovation is rapidly moving. So I think that we should steer in a direction of rules. And I think that there are also some things that should be understood as unacceptable, like toxicity and some irresponsible uses of AI. So I think that it's an evolving question. Regarding the playing field, some folks say that people, and I agree, people that learn how to leverage generative AI early would inevitably for themselves generate a competitive advantage, and that will not level the playing field over time if it's not leveled. So I think education is a big factor within this space to understand how to bring the critical mass along, so that we don't get this asynchronous or asymmetry in the nature of the playing field, so to say. So.
I think the responsibility of making that playing field level, though, it's with all of us, right? I don't know who else is going to do it.
That's correct.
If we as representatives of large firms don't take that on, it's not going to happen on its own. So we've gone down that path and said, we'll train 25,000 of our employees on generative AI. I think other companies are going down the same path. So I think it's sort of incumbent upon large corporations to take that first step and say, we're going to take on the responsibility of making sure this gets out to our employees. And then they can obviously act as ambassadors. You build that network where it multiplies and you take it out to other situations.
Okay, well, I have a 0 on the screen there, so I think that we've concluded our time. Big round of applause for our guests on the panel. Thank you, Naveen. Thank you, Dan. And now I'd like to introduce a friend of CTIFS. The Department of Economic and Community Development has been a partner with CTIFS for many, many years. We have a new commissioner and a new friend and a new partner. I'd like to introduce Commissioner Alexandra Dom.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be very quick. I'm here to introduce the governor, and then, of course, it's just on to the reception, so I don't want to delay too much. I am Alexandra Dom, the Commissioner for Economic and Community Development. Susan asked the question earlier about the capital, the insurance capital of the country. I'm going to skip the question and go right to welcoming you to the insurance capital of the country. We all have assumed and agreed that that's correct. So I mentioned I'm going to introduce the governor, and I just want to do that with a quick anecdote about something that's been on the governor's mind a lot lately, and a question that he's asking all of us, which is, what is Connecticut going to look like in 2035? And what should we all be doing now in order to make that happen? And so I think one thing we're positive about, one thing we're very confident about, is that Connecticut's going to continue to be the insurance capital of the country. It's a key, insurance is a key industry for us. We're investing in it in many different ways, and it's going to be a continued focus of the administration over the next couple of years. Why is it an important industry? Well, you all have you know the reasons, there's a long list, but one thing I wanted to point out is that for every one job that's created in the insurance industry, 2.5 are created elsewhere in the economy because of induced and indirect economic benefits. So this is an industry with a really high ROI for the state. We have recognized that, and we've prioritized it to date. So under the governor's leadership, the administration has invested in innovation in the InsurTech bridge between the UK and Connecticut, and we're also investing in the Yukon Tech Institute initiative that is going to hopefully bring more tech talent and InsurTech talent specifically to the state. So these are ways that we are committed to this industry, and we know that we're going to need to commit to not only doing what we've been doing well for the last many decades, but also we're going to be a partner with the industry in innovating in all the ways that we've heard about today on the stage. So we know the companies are not going to be able to rest on their laurels. The state is also not going to rest on our laurels, and we're going to continue to be partners to the industry. And I know the governor is committed to that vision. He's committed to innovation. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Governor Ned Lamont.
Hey, everybody. You still awake? Look, I'm not going to give you a lecture on AI. I can barely spell AI. But I can tell you, it's a really exciting time to be starting a career, running your business, and a transformation that's going on. And it's not always. I mean, timing is important. You want to be alive during the Renaissance, not the Middle Ages. When I was starting my business, I was in the world of telecommunications. It was, sort of the early days of computing and Bill Gates and the desktop and moving on to the internet, and things were changing so quickly. The productivity, the information superhighway, you're standing still, you're going to be roadkill on the superhighway. Do you remember all that? And these periods of great change and innovation and renaissance don't happen all the time. A lot of change happens in a short period of time, then you digest it and you work it through. And we had a period of great productivity in this country, 1980 to 2000 or so, really driven by IT. And I know what that meant in terms of your business. I know what it meant in terms of my business. And then we, digested a little bit. I think we're about to enter into another one of those incredible periods of productivity and change driven by AI. And I think that's what makes it such a fascinating time to be starting a career, make it a fascinating time to have a lead role in your company where you can make the changes that you got to do to keep up. Poor old state of Connecticut, we were just barely keeping up with the IT revolution from the 1980s and 90s, and now we have to jumpstart again. As I think about the insurance business, man, it's tough. And when it comes to evaluating and calculating risk, that's got to be more complicated than ever. So if I was thinking about where AI might be, I mean, here in state government, I think first and foremost, we're thinking about it in terms of the customer experience. And I've got, hundreds of people answering calls on unemployment claims and SNAP benefits. And I can see how state government will be transformed dramatically. I don't know your business, but I gotta believe that particularly property and casualty, that world is changing on its head. The whole concept of a 100-year storm is on its head. How you evaluate and analyze that risk and turn that into a reasonable risk-adjusted rate of return, I've got to believe that AI will be core to what you are doing going forward. And I'll also tell you that I need you guys more than ever. As a business guy turned governor, we do everything we can at the state level to mitigate risk. And, I know what substations were underwater during Hurricane Sandy. I know where along the coast are more likely to flood. But our analysis is a little cursory, a little anecdotal. And so I've spent a fair amount of time, and I urge each and every one of you to work with us as the state of Connecticut as we try and figure out where we make our infrastructure investments that mitigate risk. I think we're on the same side of that equation, doing everything we can to keep our insured safer and mitigate that risk. I don't want to be Florida. I don't want to be California, where a lot of folks won't even provide the property and casualty insurance any longer because the risks are too tough to determine and changing too fast. So I got to tell you, in state government, there's a little reluctance. We're a little bit Luddites. We don't like change. What's this going to do to my job? I think you got to embrace change. And by the way, it's going to happen whether you embrace it or not. So you better get ahead of that curve. And that's what I'm going to try and do in the state of Connecticut to make sure we take full advantage of AI. And that's what each and every one of you have got to do as well. How can I help? Best thing I can do is make sure you have the talent you need going forward. And there we've got a fair number of resources. Alexandra Daum, Kelly Valeris, who does workforce development. We've got the Tech Talent Fund. We're trying to create the programs and learning opportunities to make sure the next generation of AI folks and the inverse of that, cybersecurity, we're training those people. It's going to be the most incredible job training effort we have if we're going to take advantage of this revolution and make sure that Hartford stays the insurance capital of the world. That starts with workforce, that starts with talent, and that's where my job comes into place. Make sure you have the talent you need. Make sure they can get to and from the office by speeding up transportation. Make sure they have a housing they can afford to live at. Make sure we have urban centers where young people want to be. We're making good progress there. Then you're going to have the talent you need that takes you to the next generation, and I hope to God you do it right here in the great state of Connecticut. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you at the reception.
So, thank you, Governor, and for those in the audience, we really couldn't have a better relationship between the private sector and the Governor and his staff. It is hand in glove and working in ways that I don't think we've seen in a long time. So thank you, Governor, for your investment in our industries and in Hartford. Before you all go, I'd like to first thank our sponsors from today, specifically Cognizant. Thank you very much for being one of our top sponsors. I would also like to invite everybody upstairs to the Chihuly room so you could help celebrate the 20th anniversary of the CTIFS. We have drinks, we have cocktails, we have food, and hopefully some lively conversation. So thank you everybody for coming today. Thank you to Empower for hosting our reception this evening, and thank you for coming.